Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. It's the show where you can call in and talk to trans people. If you have questions, if you have commentary, if you have beef, if you need support, if you need advice, we are here to give all of those things and more. So today, it's me. Hi, I'm Luxander. You should know who I am by now. Hey, Ben, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm righteously angry, and I think most of us here are also righteously angry because, quite frankly, there's a shit show, multiple shit shows, all at the same time, constant, nonstop shit shows, and of course, everything goes wrong, and it's always trans people at fault. There's never anybody else causing any kind of problems. Everybody else has been perfectly stable, perfectly complying with laws and regulations. It's just this pesky trans people that keep getting in the way and hindering progress. So, so I'm righteously angry. I'm ready for some beef today. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So if you're ready to throw down, if you're ready to fight Ben, because
Yeah.
Ben's in the mood to fight God today, apparently,
Oh,
call
yeah.
in. The number is in the description, 720-619-2288, or you can use the web caller. That's particularly preferred for the international callers. I know y'all have an easier time on the web rather than trying to call in. So check that number out if you want to call and talk to us. And don't forget, it's the top of the show, but hitting the like button, still super important, immediately helps the show. So if you have a moment to quickly do that, that would be great. And I'm ready to look at last week's poll. I wasn't here last week, so I did check. I read the comments on this one. Do you think banning trans people from public life is a good use of American taxpayer dollars while issues like the trade war, a looming recession, and a lack of access to healthcare continue to remain unaddressed? Of course, 96% said no, 4% said yes. I don't know, Ben, what are your thoughts on this one?
This is even funnier this week, especially in light of certain OPSEC violations. Like, oh yeah, it's going to be a great idea to get rid of all the people who actually earn their position and instead put people in who are loyalists. That definitely won't backfire at all. And then sure enough, it backfired, and it's hilarious, you know? Like, and for all of us that have to go through cybersecurity training, like we have to do it every fucking year. There's multiple trainings you have to do about cybersecurity and like how not to like leak classified data or even like controlled unclassified data. All of that stuff. There's regulations on all of it. You have to be careful about who gets what information. And somehow like it's worth funneling money into opposing trans people's right to exist, because that's clearly the problem, and not the fact that our system is so incompetent and the people running the system are so incompetent. So yeah, this
Yeah.
this aged in a very funny way.
Yeah. It's like things just continue to evolve in a way that, continues to beg the whole you have to laugh so you don't cry
Yeah.
thing, because it's absurd right now. I saw in the comments some people were saying that the phrasing of this question implies that if there wasn't a trade war, looming recession, and lack of access to healthcare, then maybe banning trans people from public life would be appropriate, which I don't think was the intention of the question. It's just saying like there are more important things going on, which I think is kind of a common narrative that we're trying to engage with a little bit, like focusing on stuff like prices being expensive at the grocery store and lack of access to public parks, since those are going to increasingly have like fewer people to manage them. And like, yeah, why are we focusing on trans people in the midst of all that? It seems like we should do other things maybe that would actually help
because
people.
it's because egg prices are related to trans people. Okay, well, so hear me out. I got a correlation for you. So, as there's been an increase in the amount of people who are openly trans and getting access to gender affirming care, egg prices have also gone up. So it's clearly a correlation, and therefore trans people are the cause of egg prices going up. So
Totally. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. No notes. The other question that I saw people asking, which I believe is a disingenuous question, just, trying to make sense of that 4%, was people saying, well, how are trans people being banned from public life? And it's like, okay, I mean, I'll answer the question because it's like, if you can't use the bathroom somewhere, you can't be there for longer than like a couple hours. And that is effectively banning you from being in public. And that's just one example. So,
Yeah.
there aren't gender neutral bathrooms everywhere. It's not always safe to go to the bathroom that we're quote unquote supposed to. So that is functionally saying like, well, why don't you just use your bathroom at home? And sometimes people do say that. And it's like, okay, now you said the quiet part out loud. You want trans people to not
Yeah.
be in public. And so that is the explicit intent for at least some number of people who are advocating for these things. So anyway, with all that being said, let's take a quick look at next week's poll. We're not going to discuss it right now because we actually have a caller who's going to give us a really great opportunity to get into the meat of this. But there will be a poll in the chat for you to hit yes or no to. The question is, does a history of gender dysphoria diagnosis imply a permanent mental health safety risk? So the question basically is, if someone has been diagnosed with gender dysphoria at any point in their life, does that mean that they are going to still be at risk for all other mental health issues, basically that tend to be associated with that, like depression and all that stuff? We are asking for a good reason, but we're just going to kind of leave it open-ended, and you can make your decision there in the chat. If you have any comments, of course, go to the page, the posts part of the channel to get your comments in there if you want to elaborate on your answer. With all that said, lines are filling up. Make sure you get in there if you want to get in the queue. And I am ready to, I guess, just go ahead and take our first caller. Does that sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and start with Mila. She, her pronouns from Colorado, wants to talk about whether gender is rooted in biology or if it's solely a social construct. Mila, you're live on the line. How's it going?
Hi, guys. It's going good. How are you?
We're doing okay so
We're
far,
here.
I guess.
We're here.
Yeah. All right, lay it on
Ben,
us,
I
Mila.
actually think you have the. Well, before I get into it, I just wanted to say I think Ben, you have the causality reversed. I think what's actually happening is that the egg price is rising. It's actually creating more trans people. I think that's that's how it spreads, is through the egg prices.
So we got a debate
'Cause
now
causation
of chicken or the egg. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's true. If we're talking about trans people as like the term eggs, that there's another argument there.
Oh my God, I
digress.
I didn't even think of that connection.
So many ways we could spin
Cool.
this.
Well,
anyway, what's your question today?
So I'm a little nervous about this question because I think, the last time I called, there was some friendly disagreement, and I think I managed to kind of boil it down to where the root of it lies for me. And I'm a little nervous. I know you're in a fighting mood, so I see all of us as friends and allies. So I think my question is around, is gender, is it something that is rooted in like biology, or is it something that is solely only, a subjective social construct? I have my own thoughts on this, but, I'm the one asking the question, so I'll leave it open to you guys just to hear you out first.
I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious just like which way you tend to lean, because that does influence how I would take the conversation. Like, do you tend to lean toward thinking it's more biological or social?
Well, I think everything social is biological at the root of it, right? Like, I mean, when we're talking like mechanistically, right? I mean, but that's a very abstract answer, and I'm going to try not to over-intellectualize this call. I believe it's both, but I also, in my personal experience, have noticed that like there seems to be a lot of justified fear around biological explanations of gender or biological defenses of gender because, and this is where I think the root of the disagreement lies, is like, how do I say this? Like, I think the root of the disagreement is that, like, if we explain gender from a biological perspective, that opens us up to vulnerability as far as gatekeeping. People doing brain scans to see who's really trans, right? Like if we say, hey, this is medically necessary because, it's a medical condition, it's a biological construct, then, that's going to leave out, certain trans people who maybe don't have, the ability to prove, hey, I'm incongruent from a biological perspective, when maybe they arrive at that conclusion from more of a social interpretation of what gender is. And just to clarify before we get into it, I think our goals and our intentions are the same. I don't want any trans people left out. I don't want a board of people that aren't trans gatekeeping and policing who is and isn't trans enough, who qualifies to be diagnosed with a medical condition. I think where the disagreement lies is, I tend to think that, like, my interpretation of kind of what's happening is that we're taking in my opinion, some of the weaker defenses for the legitimacy of trans people and trans inclusions, and we're trying to apply that to everyone to make sure no one gets left out, when my approach would maybe be to take the strongest justification for medical transition and apply it to everyone, including the people that maybe, are more vulnerable and don't have, aren't someone like me who has 2 X chromosomes and was born with a penis and can be like, well, clearly there's a incongruence here, like I would rather take a stronger approach and try to use that to protect everyone who, needs access to gender affirming care.
I guess my first question is, why do we need to focus on only one of these sides? Like, I know you're saying that you agree that there's a bit of both, but why do we need to only argue, as you say, the stronger side? Why can't we argue both sides? Like both from a sociologic basis and from a biologic basis? Like, why do we have to preferentially choose one or the other?
And I'm not suggesting we choose one or the other. I think that our defense is best when we look at the whole picture and we take in every, I think what I tend to notice, or at least maybe it's just in my head, but like, I feel like a lot of times the trans activist community does want to kind of solely focus on the societal explanation. And then when someone goes into the biological explanation, or at least someone like me, I kind of get, and I get it. I get the fear, right? Like, yeah, because there's a lot of people who do it. But like,
here's the problem. And you mentioned one of the big concerns, and that is the idea of gatekeeping, the idea of saying like who's trans and who isn't. And so like, that's a place where the biologic argument loses its utility. Because if the whole point is to allow broader access and allow for societal acceptance, effectively using an argument to gatekeep, like that could be used to gatekeep, might be counterintuitive for that objective. Similarly, like in a biological setting, even if we could pinpoint what specific virus is causing someone's common cold, it's not going to help us, and it might only cause damage in terms of excess money, excess resources being utilized for that thing. So you definitely pinpointed that particular issue. But I think something else that we're missing here is, like, even if we try to use a biological argument, like we have so many biological arguments in favor of like sex and gender separation, like the terms being separated, and the nuance that we try to communicate with people is lost by so many people who don't understand nuance. And so on the scientific side, yes, I understand that. Like there is a give and take, like a push-pull thing with biological origins of like this terminology, and then kind of how we've changed those definitions to more accurately represent what we're communicating. Like, yeah, there are very likely biological contributions to what we see as gender and sex, and they're different qualities that, relate to those different terms. However, I think in commonplace discussion, it's less clear to have the biological argument, because it's a layer of nuance that I think the majority of the population cannot really comprehend. Like even your example of someone who is XX with male genitalia, a lot of our arguments, if you watch back the show back, pretty much any episode, you'll see that we keep trying to tell people, yeah, there are exceptions to this rule, and people can't even grasp the idea that you can be XX and have male genitalia. So we can't even bridge that gap with sex, much less with adding biology to gender. So I think you're correct. I just don't think it's as useful, even if it may be a stronger argument in an academic circle. I don't think it's a stronger argument in a lay circle.
I
Like
also
a
want to
rhetoric
jump in.
perspective.
I just want to jump in really quick because
Go
I
ahead.
also think that like you're arguing almost for two different things when you're going either one of these routes. Like the argument by biology is like that lends itself toward a conclusion that is inherently exclusionary. Like the purpose of medical diagnosis is like and especially with something that we consider like a mental health thing, we have to like make sure it's not just an eating disorder or whatever, like you have to
Right.
pare it down to like this one thing, which means that you're creating more and more opportunities for people to be excluded who need to be included. This is why we say technically the detransition rate should be higher, because currently a lot of people who need it aren't getting it. Like the threshold is so high for people to even get the care in the first place, especially for kids. So like the like I think that when you're making the biological argument, you are ultimately feeding into a conclusion that is like, let's figure out how we can, determine who's true trans or who's not. And then there's also the question of like, okay, if they find the part of the brain that's trans, then they're going to try to lobotomize it and whatever. They're going to try to change it. They're going to say, we're going to look for these pregnancies and terminate those ones. Whereas if you make the social argument, and I think the strongest version of the social argument is the autonomy argument. And if you just say, this is America, I deserve the right to do whatever I want with my body. I deserve the right to take medical risks. Like I'm allowed to do all these other things. I'm allowed to get a tattoo. I'm allowed to get a Brazilian butt lift. Like I'm allowed to, sign up for clinical trials with experimental medication. Like I'm allowed to take all these risks. I'm allowed to like, not, well, that's not a good example because you do have to, I don't know. Some places don't have helmet laws. So it's like, I'm allowed to ride a motorcycle without a helmet in some places. Like I'm allowed to take risks that could endanger me. And why would it be any different medically speaking? So like, as far as just going on the social end, I think that is like the strongest way to argue it is like, I don't care what anybody's reasons are. I don't care what their diagnosis is or whatever. People have the right to just do shit to their own bodies. And like, it just seems that that's it's stronger argument to me than the biological stuff. And it's also actually leading toward an aim that is more expansive rather than more exclusionary.
I totally understand. And you guys said a lot, so I really want to address everything because I didn't want to interrupt, right? So sure. For Ben's first point, which is like, basically like, you don't like, where is it useful? For one, I think one of the most important opportunities that's often overlooked is weaponizing, the opponent's logic and beliefs against them. And when we completely abandon or we don't incorporate to complete the full justification, when we leave out the biological element, we kind of allow them to dictate it for us. When in reality,
I'm not saying that we leave out the biological argument, but we should not as heavily emphasize it within most debates because, like, of all the reasons I mentioned, I don't think anyone here is discounting that there is a biological component, but I don't think it's as strong as you're saying it is within most arguments.
Where I think, I guess what I'm trying to say is that where I do think that it's strong is in allowing us to weaponize and essentially reclaim biological essentialism, because the people that call themselves biological essentialists are not actually biological essentialists. They are reproductive essentialists, and reproductive essentialists are inherently oversimplifying biology. And to
right, but we can do that.
Understand,
but we can claim that back. We can still claim that back, I think, with the distinction of sex and gender identity. I think you can still separate those out. And
I'm not saying
make
we
those
shouldn't
and make those same points. I don't think we need to say that gender itself is. I don't think we need to emphasize as much the gender being biological as we do like the gender identity and sex separation. I still think that's
I understand.
stronger and less ambiguous.
I understand. And the thing is, like, I've mostly just emphasized my conclusions for the sake of simplicity up to this point. I haven't quite had the opportunity to explain why I believe the things I do. I've kind of just emphasized, hey, this is the conclusion I've arrived at. And that's what I'm kind of trying to do now, is like explain, okay, this is my thought process, this is my reasoning to lead me to believing that these are the stronger defenses. And I think the best way to explain that is also by addressing what Lux said, right? Which is, the strongest social argument is bodily autonomy. And I would say that a biological explanation, it's not mutually exclusive with self-ID and bodily autonomy. It is, if anything, my approach in a biological explanation is to show that biology shows us that the strongest evidence we have for a biological explanation of gender is to take bodily autonomy and self-ID and observe that as the best evidence available, because modern technology is not always capable of the neuroscience that make us human, that make us, experience neurological incongruence or gender incongruence. So if the reason I kind of believe the way that I do is that, like, for one, let me explain. My major in college was evolutionary neurology, which basically, and neuronal connectomics, which basically looks at how we, like, to simplify it, how do we go from neurons to thoughts? Like, how do neurons build on each other to actually create computational systems that produce what we're experiencing as consciousness? So from a biological perspective, I see how we can actually protect things like self-ID and protect things like bodily autonomy by making the same arguments we would use for intersex people, where a person might have ambiguous genitalia that they're born with. Let's say it's twins, right? One twin might have they have the same ambiguous genitals, but bodily autonomy would dictate that, hey, one person has the choice. Neither one of them have the choice to be born with the condition they have, but both have the choice to choose to prioritize acceptance, being like, hey, I like myself the way I am. I don't want to change anything. I don't consider myself to have a disorder. I consider myself to be perfect just the way I was born. And the other twins say, hey, I prioritize congruence. I want my body to be in alignment with one particular biological sex. But so I'm going to take advantage of all.
I fail to see how this is different than arguments that we'd be making. Like, I fail to see how this argument is different than, like, because I use a very similar argument, but that goes back to, like, it's less so if there's a biological reason for me to be making this decision. Like, sure, there might as well be, but the important thing isn't there's a biological reason having you make that decision. The important thing is that you made that decision for yourself. And that social decision is what's important about it, and not the I think the depth of the biological origin of that decision, like, while it's interesting to think about, I don't think that's useful in this case, because either way, whether or not we know what that biological basis is for that decision to be made, we can still respect that decision. And I think we're jumping too far into the weeds where we don't need to go with it. As far as
I think it's useful to the extent that we
okay to think about it, but
I think it's useful to the extent that we need to emphasize that it's medically necessary. Because while bodily autonomy is a good excuse is a good explanation for why we should have the right to do it, it's not always the best excuse to say that it's a medical necessity. Basing it in biology is what makes us
right. But we have arguments as far as, like, treatment efficacy that we can use to highlight that it's medically necessary, right? Like, some of these things that,
but those get weaponized.
We look to
those get weaponized against us.
So does the medical thing, Mila. I don't know if you are aware, but you're asking us to focus on a biological element when one of the players on the board, one of the very active players on the board, is eugenicists. Like, do we really think that this is the best idea or the strongest version of the argument to, like, focus on the idea that we are biologically different? And, like, furthermore, that that we require
Go
an
ahead.
additional biological explanation to deserve healthcare when cisgender people are given the same healthcare based on autonomy reasons and not based on health reasons. Like, not one single time have I ever had like a hormone test done when I asked to be put on birth control to manage my period symptoms or my PCOS.
Mhm.
So, like, we're creating, I mean, we're honestly conceding in a way that trans people
I'm
like require an additional burden of proof before we deserve access to medical care or social recognition if we are tying in biology at all to the premise of self
I
ID.
I wouldn't say that it's conceding. If anything, I'd say it's reclaiming. I'd say we're reclaiming the very scientific framing that's used against us by showing that, hey, when you follow science to its effective conclusion, we're actually, like you said, I'm glad you brought up eugenics because, you know, like the example that I often made was like, you know, if we call a person, if we determine a person's sex by what their natural biological outcome would be, by that logic, we should declare people that have had heart transplants biologically dead. That goes on to actually emphasize eugenics. So while people who, you know, praise eugenics, they take on a biological, uh, like coding, they're not actually rooted in biology because what, you know, the most grounded interpretation of biology would say is that everyone who can benefit from medical treatment deserves access to that medical treatment.
Right, but don't we have that already with the demonstrating the efficacy of gender affirming care? Like, it's all,
I
a
would
lot of
say
the
that's
things that
what's
you're
being challenged.
mentioning are measured through subjective means. So
Yeah.
we don't need to dive so deep into the objective, like kind of building block level science of it, because we already have enough data at this broader subjective level. Like, we're
and that's
already
the
meeting
point
the
I'm trying
burdens
to
of proof
make.
that we need to meet.
That is the point that I'm trying to make. Biological essentialism would show us that we don't need to detect the causal mechanisms of a condition in order to observe that, hey, this is the best treatment for it. This is what creates the highest degree of alignment. That's actually exactly my point, because it's the same standard of care we use for PTSD, for ADHD. We don't have to do a brain scan and go into someone's brain and detect.
So I don't see why we're playing kind of the word games then with biological versus social origins of like gender.
Here's
Like,
why.
I'm confused about, like, as if we agree on kind of these things that we're doing and the burden of proof that we've met, I'm confused about why this is even a debate if we're going to keep doing the things that we've been doing. Like, how is this?
Let me explain.
Like, what do we need to add to? What do we specifically need to add to this discussion? Like, I guess I'm confused about
what I would
your
add to it is
specifically is.
So my argument is to explain gender as a, I would almost describe it as a disorder of sexual development, a form of DSD, because when we frame it that way, we emphasize that it's medically necessary. We protect things like self-ID as the most effective way to diagnose it, and bodily autonomy as consistent with major principles to justify allowing it, and also to solidify legal recognition from a law perspective and saying that, hey, someone who has sex-based deformities shouldn't be discriminated against. To emphasize,
I mean, I disagree with a lot of the language being used here, because I also don't agree with using like disorder of sexual development or like deformity, like, because those are already negative. Like,
and those
those
are
have negative connotation. So like it's much. I would say
for the same reasons.
Approaching this more as
approaching
it as a variation of normal. And that's how we need to approach this, like less pathologizing trans people, less pathologizing this. And this is why I want to lean more into the social side of gender, because your difference in gender identity, like the identity piece, is, I don't think that there's a lot of ways somebody could have a like disordered identity. Like, sure, the way psychology can talk about certain things like that, like there's some language that's kind of ambiguous with certain diagnoses.
Contextual.
But yeah, but the thing is, like,
contextually deformed.
To say that your sense of self is in a societal context where gender itself is very contextual. Like there isn't something that is the same as womanhood in any culture, like universally. Like it is very context based. And so I think it's a
I mean, the
problem
deformity aspect
when
is
we try to
contextual.
say that there's a disorder related to, like, I guess, like when you overemphasize the biological components of an identity, that's where we get into some of this weird stuff as well. And so I think we kind of need to separate this out more,
But
instead
if I
of
can clarify
like,
what I meant by deformity, I don't mean deformity inherently, right? Because it is context dependent. Like, take the analogy with the two twins. For one twin, they may say that, hey, I'm not deformed. I don't agree with you pathologizing my genitalia and saying that it's not just a natural variation, right? But for the twin that wants corrective surgery and prioritizes alignment,
so then why
it's
do
fair
we
to say
need
that
to
that's
emphasize the
let me finish.
biological?
Let me finish.
No,
Let me finish.
but why then? Because I think we've already gone over this. Why then do we need to emphasize that biological component when we could have already gotten to that same conclusion by their identity statement of saying, this is what works for my body, this is what I'm okay with happening to me, this is who I am as a person.
Because that is the biological component.
This treatment, that I don't really care. Like, all honestly, like this whole argument just seems like overly, like, it's so much semantics that I don't think is useful. And I think we're spending so much time talking about like the nitty-gritty, like,
against us,
there
though.
any amount of biological component. I think we've missed the utility of this conversation. I think we're too far into the
I think it's useful. I think the semantics is being weaponized against us, whether or not we're in agreement.
But we agree on the conclusion. We agree on the access to care. We agree on all these other things. I don't get why we have to argue then about, like,
again,
which,
because the
and when we're using
semantics is being weaponized against us. Because the semantics is being weaponized against us, and I think the best way to defend ourselves.
And I don't think you found a conclusion. I don't think you found a solution to that in your argument.
When you're talking, I try not to. I want to hear you out. Like, that's. I think there's a lot of value in what you're bringing, and I'm completely open to adjusting and recalibrating to, like, account for important arguments that I'm not considering. I mean, that's why I'm listening. I mean, if you'll allow me, the reason why I think it's important to discuss the semantics and how we frame these things is because whether or not we agree or disagree, there is a very strong opposition who is not genuinely invested in what's best for the community or what's best to prevent detransitions. They are solely interested in creating a moral panic that gets them votes because, they can go and slash Medicare and Social Security and richen themselves by making us the scapegoats. I think that whether or not, no matter what we do, they are going to be fighting against us no matter what. However, I think that if we strengthen our defenses by not abandoning, or avoiding biological interpretations, it can give us a stronger way to defend ourselves.
I want to cut in really quick here because I want to ask you a question. Who is it that you're trying to refine this argument for? Like, who is your intended audience? Who do you think that we are not adequately capturing with our current mode of rhetoric?
To clarify, are you saying, like, right now,
you're saying, okay, you're saying that you want to have a certain type of argument, right? You're saying, like, I want to speak about this in a certain way, and that trans activists don't talk about biology enough, or they overemphasize the social aspect. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that, like, I feel like often what I'm told not to say what I know to be true from my biological, and also, like, I feel like I'm not even allowed to talk about the medical condition that I was born with as an intersex person who also is a transgender person who's been told repeatedly that I don't even belong in this discussion because I'm not trans, I'm intersex. Like, the reality is that, like, I feel like I can't even talk about my own medical condition because people are telling me that, oh no, if you say this, then that gives the opposition the opportunity to gatekeep us. When I actually think that the way that I'm explaining my medical condition and extending that to all trans people, regardless of whether or not they have a diagnosable medical condition, actually protect self-ID and bodily autonomy by evolving the conversation. So to
I
answer
feel
your
like you're
question
kind
more
of
directly,
flipping back and forth on this. It's like I'm picking up that you're concerned about your personal interactions within the trans community and like how we speak about these things in private. But then you also say stuff like self-ID, which tells me that you're speaking about this in a broader context where we're discussing policy and how to make these arguments in order to achieve our
because it's
rights. So
both.
I don't really know where the okay, so but that's two separate questions. Like how do we talk about these things in
So let me,
private? Like, sure, we can acknowledge that there's a biological component. Everybody has like seen that there's different research on this that has different results, and everybody has their opinions on it. And that's like a high level nuanced within the trans community conversation. And I am sorry that people have been, invalidating and minimizing of you talking about your intersex condition. Obviously, I don't think that's cool. And we could talk about like the politics of not being shitty to each other personally within activist groups and stuff, but that is like a very different conversation to a broader like, how much should we be emphasizing biological components versus social components when we are arguing for our rights? Which is why I'm like wondering, like, who is this for? Who are you trying to craft this for? That's two totally different audiences.
I'm trying to craft it for trans people. I'm trying to craft it for trans people to not be afraid of biology, but to embrace it as the best defense. And so, in a sense, both. For one, for trans
but
people.
That's what you just,
and
okay,
then,
so you're saying you're trying
though.
to convince other trans people that the biological component is the best rhetorical device. So I am asking you, who is, okay, I know that you're trying to advise trans people on how to make the argument. Who do you imagine is the audience on the receiving end who is not currently being convinced by our present mode where we don't emphasize biology? Thank you.
I appreciate the clarification. I really do. I would say that it's for uneducated people that, obviously the biological explanations I'm giving in this call are a bit advanced. And it's kind of why I want the trans community on my side, because I can't do it on my own. And, a more organic, effective way of doing it, I think, is to have, I kind of over-intellectualize it, but I think that if I were able to, inspire trans people to, or inspire my own community to embrace biological defenses of our existence and our rights to inclusion, then by doing so, we can actually find a way to change it in a way that's more rhetorically effective for people that maybe I'm not able to reach with my over-intellectualization. By saying that things like
I'm sorry to
sex is immutable,
but like that's why my initial questions were the way that they were, because like Lux and I and Arden and Josie, like we have these conversations with uneducated people every week, like, and we've fine-tuned a lot of our arguments, and I've tried like a lot of those more biological points, and they do not often land well, because again, we're talking about people who can't understand that sex and gender are different things. They're people who don't understand what gender identity is. Like, they don't understand that you can have an identity about your gender. Like, this is a level we have to dumb it down to, and you kind of have to. Yeah, and it might work in your circle, but here's the problem. But Mila, here's the problem though. You're taking your own experience with your own discussions with people in your circles that have responded well, and are telling other trans people, hey, use this argument because it should work for you. And I'm saying it hasn't worked in the people I've discussed with. So that's where I have some disagreement. No, and that's where I have some disagreement. Like, and I keep telling you, like, I agree with a lot of your conclusions. I agree with a lot of the nuance, but I disagree with the utility. And I'm getting a little bit frustrated because you keep wanting to push back and tell me that, yes, it works. Yes, it works. I'm like, I'm telling you that sure, like, it might work for you, but I am not convinced that I'm ready to take that argument the same way that you are taking that argument when you are arguing it. And that's a place where we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Listen, I completely understand
some things
your
we're going to have to agree to disagree about, and it doesn't mean that we're opposing. It doesn't mean we're opposing your points or your experience in any way. It's not meant to invalidate anybody. It's just this approach, like, isn't as universally applicable to other people's arguments, and just because I don't use that particular approach it doesn't mean that it's not going to work for you. It's
I'm
just
not saying you need to.
I'm choosing not to take this approach.
I'm not saying you need to, and I think that, you know, everyone's approach is like effective for unique reasons. Like I think if someone is effective, for instance, the societal approach in making a human and not just a bunch of like overcomplicated ideas, but in real, tangible, you know, explanations, I think there's a lot of merit to that, right? Like that's why I said I think it's both, and I think it's best when both are working together and not kind of trying to police the other's speech. I'm definitely not trying to police your speech and trying to tell you, listen, don't explain it from a social or philosophical perspective, solely explain it from a biological one. I think that leaves a lot out of the reality of the nuance of the situation. What I am trying to say is that, like, I think that when someone says that a man will never be a woman and therefore XYZ, you know, solely responding by saying sex and gender are different is useful and helpful. But if we leave out the portion that says, actually, these are the biological reasons that, you know, medical transition creates meaningful changes to biological traits that are relevant for sex classification.
We do make those arguments. And again, we do make those arguments. I don't know if you need to go back and watch the show, but there are times and places where we take that perspective. So I think we've kind of reached the end of where conversation is. Like I think we're going in circles a bit. I guess
fair enough.
Lux,
and I know
if you have
that
anything else to say too, but
I'm not saying okay, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if Lux wants to jump in.
I want to get one last word in, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it for today. Just speaking to the strength of an argument and how convincing it can be, given how people respond to those arguments. If we make a biological argument and we present studies, in the current situation, our opposition is selective about when they care about science and the studies and all that kind of like you know, the actual evidence that's present. So what tends to happen and what easily can happen is they will call into question our sources, say that they're biased, present their own studies that are from, you know, much poorer quality, you know, institutions, whatever, that are also heavily biased, obviously. And there's a lot of like murkiness that comes in when you're trying to make the biological argument, because someone else can say, well, I found a study. But when you take the autonomy argument, and the reason why I'm going to maintain my position that that is the strongest argument is that you have to, the only response that they can have if you say everybody deserves to do whatever the fuck they want with their body, you force them to say everybody but trans people, like, because there's no argument. There is literally nothing you can say in opposition to that position that isn't inherently like, it puts them on the spot and doesn't allow any wiggle room. Whereas I believe presenting a biological argument of like, let's look at these studies and all this. And I also want to say, related to something you said earlier, I don't think that the fact that treatment has been proven to be effective has anything at all to do with the biological portion of that. Like, you could, I guess, say that like, you know, the hormones in my body are now the correct ones, but like, that's not really how we measure well-being in like populations who are having HRT done. So I also don't think that showing that it is effective medical treatment is necessarily even saying anything about it being like biologically
proven.
Right. Yeah. I think that that's a well-being thing. That doesn't mean that's like proof that it's a biological mechanism per se.
I want to
give you one last word, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap. That's okay, Mila.
Okay. My last word is going to be this. I think their most common response to the bodily autonomy argument tends to be, well, you have the right to mutilate yourselves, but you don't have the right to force me to play along with your delusions, as if it's a medical, you know, as if it's a philosophical thing that, hey, if you have the right to change your body, yeah. I have the right not to recognize it. And that's where I'm trying to shift to a more biological explanation to show that it's objective and empirically true that you are being not only rude and dehumanizing whenever you insult or misgender a trans person, you're also being biologically inaccurate.
Sure. Well, thank you for the stimulating conversation, Mila. I appreciate it. Of course, feel free to call back in the future if you'd like to continue the philosophical discussion we're having. And we appreciate you and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Cool. You too, guys. Have a great one.
Bye. Okay. That was an interesting convo to start with. Okay, before we
Yeah.
get to our next caller, or I guess, do you want to say any last words on that, Ben? Since you
No,
want to have
no,
a
I think we're good.
interruption. Okay, cool, cool,
Yeah, I
cool,
think we're
cool,
good.
cool. Yeah, obviously, I've said my piece. I don't think that that's like the most. I don't think that's the most. I don't know. It's not the best way, in my opinion, to make the argument. Like, yeah, I've said my piece on this, I think. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out in the chat with us, by the way. Don't forget to hit the like button, okay? And we're going to play a game with super chats, $5 or more super chats. We will read them, and you can vote hashtag Team Lux, hashtag Team Ben. Make sure you get the hashtags in there. And so, related to our poll earlier, which if you haven't responded, make sure you respond to the poll. Our next caller is going to help us get into like a nice discussion about the whole gender dysphoria mental disorder thing. So we're going to talk to Ashley, she, her pronouns, from Virginia, wants to ask about transness as a mental disorder and access to treatment. Ashley, you're live on the line. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you guys?
Tired.
Doing all right.
Yeah, that call was kind of all over the place, but you guys kind of touched on what I wanted to ask about. So this is more of like a thing that in my head, it kind of makes intuitive sense, but I wanted to hear like from an actual trans person's perspective, especially Dr. Ben as a medical doctor. Like in my head, it makes sense that like if you consider being trans or like gender dysphoria and stuff like that as a medical disorder, it can make it easier to access things like gender affirming care and things like that. But I'm also like, there's something about that I feel like I'm missing something, and I just I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, and this is actually very interesting because there's a reason the poll is the one that it is this week. Ashley, how familiar are you with the military trans ban situation? Have you followed the court cases at all?
I haven't. I did hear that it was that was a thing back during the first Trump term, and now it's a thing again. But I haven't been keeping up with like the backlash to it.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting kind of argument related to gender dysphoria itself. Like, what is gender dysphoria? Is the diagnosis of gender dysphoria required to get access to gender affirming care? Does gender dysphoria make you mentally mentally unstable or mentally disabled, etc., whatever conservative way of putting it you want to say? There's kind of there's a catch-22 that we get into with this particular situation. So as it stands, especially if you're getting a diagnosis to get gender affirming care within the military setting or within a government paid like way of getting it, private is not as much because you can do informed consent and just get the meds that you want. But within the military, in order to have it covered, and even, actually, I will say this too, so for civilian side, if you're using insurance, it does require a diagnosis. So in the military, you are required to have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria in order to be eligible for gender affirming care. So therefore, even people who don't have gender dysphoria, but may have gender euphoria or may have better quality of life with gender affirming care, still have to have that diagnosis documented in order to get gender affirming care. And that sounds like not a huge deal, right? It sounds like, okay, I can just slap this label on, I'd still be covered. And now, cue the trans ban. The language in the trans ban is that if you have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria or ever had a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, you are now able to be deemed as medically unfit and medically unqualified to serve in the military. So when the DOJ was asked how they are going to identify trans people who are not out, or like specifically not out, but have started to transition, because for people who are completely in the closet, like there's no way to detect those people. But if you, their idea was that they go through the yearly like health assessment that you have to go through. It's this whole checklist of stuff. and they said, yeah, we're going to sift through those, and anybody who has a gender dysphoria diagnosis will immediately be deemed unfit for service. So there's that catch of not everybody who has gender dysphoria, or not everyone who is trans has gender dysphoria, but everyone with gender dysphoria as a diagnosis is a trans person. And that was the whole crux of this first lawsuit. And if you read Judge Reyes's whole opinion on it, it's pretty stellar. But because we had forced people to get the diagnosis in order to get treatment, and now that forced diagnosis is causing people to get kicked out, like how good of an indicator is this diagnosis? How necessary is it to require this diagnosis in order to get care? And how much is this screwing people over and worsening their quality of life because they have that diagnosis? So I know that was like kind of a lot of things at once, but that's kind of some of the nuance of why using the diagnostic criteria in general is helpful, but also less helpful in today's day.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely get that. I get it. I get that from that angle. I am thinking about it mainly from like a civilian perspective of like, oh, if you have, because I am a cis person, so like, and I have like a couple of diagnoses myself. I have chronic acid reflux, anxiety, and stuff like that. And having those diagnoses, I am able to have access to medication that does help me with those symptoms. So I guess I'm kind of thinking about it in those that sort of context of, if you have this diagnosis on paper, it would make it easier for you to access the necessary treatment to, treat your condition.
So yes, and it does give you better access, but it also gives you a label that you're going to wear for the rest of your life and single you out and make you a potential target.
And I want to say that is not the only method by which we give people treatment. That diagnosing someone with a specific disorder is not necessarily required. Ashley, you might have had experience with this as a cis woman. Have you ever tried to get birth control? Have you ever been diagnosed with anything when they've given you birth control? Like, we just give people that when they ask for it without making them go through any questionnaires or anything. So we have a model by which we could base trans care off of. We could just treat it the same way, where it's if somebody goes and asks for it, you just give it to them with informed consent of any possible risks.
Yeah, you could, because you bill it in that case. Like, there's an ICD-10 code for like encounter for like contraceptive counseling or encounter for contraception initiation. Like there's things like that where it doesn't give you a diagnosis, but it codes for the visit. You could do the same thing. Like, you do the same thing with like routine health visits. It's like encounter for general medical visit, like for adult, or like, and you don't have to have a diagnosis. It's just you came here for this particular thing. You do the same thing, like encounter for initiation of gender affirming care. Like that could be it.
Right. Yeah, I am actually on birth control. I have the implant, and that was like, I talked to my GP, and she was like, okay, yeah, if you think you would want that, then I'll set you up with an appointment with this other doctor that does it. And then I got it done the next week, and it was no big deal. Yeah,
it's super easy. As it should be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of ask about that angle of it, because again, that is something that kind of intuitively it would make sense, but there's also like, I keep feeling like with I've heard other hosts on the line say this. So just because it makes intuitive sense doesn't mean it's correct, if that makes sense. You know?
Yeah, and it's that issue too. Like I was saying that, like, and especially with the question relating to mental illness, the criteria to be labeled as a mental illness, which being trans isn't, is distress and dysfunction. And yes, there are some trans people who have extreme distress and dysfunction, not necessarily because they're trans, but because of the way that they are treated because they're trans, which like leads into, comorbid anxiety and depression disorders, PTSD, etc. So like, is there distress and dysfunction related to them being trans? Like, I'm sure there are some trans people who would qualify as having like that distress and dysfunction just based on like their body mind incongruence. But that's not, I would say that's probably not the majority of people. Majority of people, it's because of some other external factors that play into it. So is that distress from a depression, like a depressive disorder, an anxiety disorder, PTSD, or is it because they are trans? And for the people who are trans that do not have any kind of distress or dysfunction, like how do we include them and allow them to get care without suggesting that they have any distress or dysfunction? And so yeah, there's some wiggle room there. But even by the criteria that a lot of people are trying to say, all trans people are mentally unstable, and they're trying to say that because they have the diagnosis of gender dysphoria. But if not all people have distress, they can no longer use that gender dysphoria argument to say that that trans people are inherently unstable or inherently distressed or inherently dysfunctional in society.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like when someone has like schizophrenia or something, they have to say, this doesn't mean I'm like, split or whatever, that I have like multiple personalities, or I'm not like homicidal or whatever. They just say like, no, it doesn't mean I'm like that or something like that. But you have that label that creates a misconception in people's minds because of what they've heard and what they've seen in media and all that stuff. So
Yeah. And it's powerful in terms of destigmatizing and normalizing things. Like being gay used to be considered a mental illness. And I'm sure that there is some fringe part of society that still believes that. But the overwhelming normalization of gay people, I think, is like you could attribute that partially to like taking it out of the DSM, stopping treating it like something that you need to go see a therapist to fix, or like that's an inherent dysfunction in your life. So if we went a similar track with trans people, where we basically just start treating their healthcare like seeking birth control, make sure you're informed of the risks, like, birth control can increase your risk of dying of a blood clot. That's like on the same level as some of the risks of HRT. So we should be able to play ball just the same way. And there's also like this idea that like it's a clinical distress, like Ben was saying. Some people aren't distressed in the first place, but some people also resolve all of their distress emotionally, mentally, like by going through treatment with HRT. So yeah, it's this question of like, do we consider it a mental illness? Like, or, obviously it's like a part of your personality. So we could say it's in your brain, but like, yeah, is this very useful? Is it helping people get healthcare, or is it just making it harder for some people? Like the people who don't have clinical distress, you have to find a doctor who's willing to give you that diagnosis anyway. And it's just, it just seems like a situation currently that it's like too many extra steps in between when it could be much simpler.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to especially get Dr. Ben's perspective, because he is a medical doctor and he sees a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that the patients often don't see. And especially from with your perspective as being a doctor in the military too. I didn't even really think about that because, again, I'm a civilian. I'm not in the military. I don't know all the nitty-gritty things about that side of things. But
it's scary right now. It's scary right now with all of this. So
yeah, it's
but I hope all that helped.
Messed up. Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely helped clear that up for me. That's all I really had to talk about. I really find like gender stuff to be extremely interesting because I'm cis, and this is just and I find it things like psychology and anthropology and just studying the vastness of the human experience. Like I just want to sink my teeth into all the different parts of what makes people, and I just find it really interesting to talk about stuff like this.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley, for your call. I'm glad that we answered your questions. And feel free, if you have any further questions in the future, call back.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So we're going to take Brad next. Don't go away, Brad, but we are going to take a quick minute to revisit the poll. Since that conversation, we discussed a lot of the points that we wanted to make with regards to the poll, but we want to make sure you have full context if you want to, leave any comments or go argue with people in the comments about what the poll actually meant. Yeah. Does a history of gender dysphoria diagnosis imply a permanent mental health safety risk? So yeah, go ahead, just Ben, like you can lay it out.
Yeah, I'll just give like kind of the TLDR and then like a couple points I didn't address in the call. But yeah, this is related to a lot of the litigation right now regarding the military trans ban, but also kind of relates to the entire trans situation. So with military members being potentially kicked out of the military on the basis of a gender dysphoria diagnosis currently, but also any history of gender dysphoria in their military medical record. So the idea that anyone who has ever had symptoms of gender dysphoria is distressful, is in distress and disruptive to society, inherently lacking integrity and dishonorable and all of that nonsense. And I think the kind of the big take home point is that, you know, gender dysphoria isn't a death sentence and it can be controlled with gender affirming care. And the majority of people that do have access to care resolve their gender dysphoria. And so, like, if you look at this in context with other conditions that cause distress and dysfunction, i.e., depression, anxiety, PTSD, those things. And even if you look at other medical conditions like hypertension, like blurry vision, etc., like thyroid issues, like really anything can give you distress and dysfunction and could make you non-deployable or like not safe to be deployable. However, the difference is controlled or not controlled. Like, sure, if your gender dysphoria is so uncontrolled that you are a mental health risk, you are a safety risk, like, no, you should not deploy. And probably the military is not safe for you, but that's not because you're trans. It's not because you have gender dysphoria. It's because you have some other health risk that is making this difficult for you and is making it not safe for you to be out there.
It's like
That's the same thing with
comorbidities at that point.
yeah, and it's like it's the same thing with uncontrolled depression. Like if your depression is so off the rails, and you try medications and medications are not working for you, and therapy is not working for you, and like all the recommended management is not working for you. Okay, yeah, then maybe this is not safe for you. But somebody who has depression can still serve in the military when they are controlled. Like if you're on an SSRI and you're doing fine, you've been on the same one for a while, you're in therapy, you know, you're having improvements, you're not having any safety risks, you can still serve. Same thing, you can have bipolar 2 and still serve as long as you have controlled symptoms. That should be the same thing with gender dysphoria. If your symptoms are controlled, which we see evidence of gender affirming care largely resolving symptoms and making it controlled, that should keep you able to serve. And so it shouldn't be, have you ever had gender dysphoria? It should be, are you personally safe? Are you safe as an individual person, regardless of what your trans status is? So that's kind of the crux of this.
Yep. And as I mentioned in the call, like, you know, it's not like, obviously there are people who don't ever feel that distress, and there are people for whom that treatment completely resolves that distress. And so yeah, there's, as with anything, there are going to be people who have that like severe clinical distress, but you can't just assume that for everybody. It's not, that is just discrimination. That's just animus. Yeah, what are they doing now? Like, they're like, we're going to send out a questionnaire that you have to answer all these questions about your gender within the next 45 days or something. We're just trying to find other ways to sneak around the injunction or whatever it is that's been placed right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, have fun in the comments on that. On the posts page on the channel, they changed it. It was community, now it's posts. Go check out the posts over there. Oh, Jimmy made a new coin also, so you can go look at the coin that Jimmy made on the post page. So we are ready to take Brad from Texas, uses he, him pronouns, and wants to talk about transgenderism as a philosophy and movement. Doesn't agree with transgenderism, but wants to find a middle ground. So Brad, you're live on the line with Luxander and Dr. Ben. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going, guys? How are you doing today?
Living my best life.
Yeah.
That's good. Glad to hear that. Yeah, so I want to start off by giving some context. So my personal belief is that every human being is a child of God, whether you take that in the literal sense or the metaphorical sense. we're all brothers and sisters in humanity. So I want to make it clear. I am not transphobic in the sense of wishing bad for anyone. I want everyone to have the basic necessities, live a great life. But I am skeptical if the transgender ideology, the movement, is beneficial for the individual and society. So I'm hoping we could have a respectful dialogue about that. And I make my points, you guys make your points, and see where we can meet.
Can I just ask you to give a very short definition of what you mean by transgender ideology so that I know what you're taking issue with specifically?
Okay, so the idea that a man can become a woman or vice versa, I do not believe in this. I believe that even if you look at it from a pure secular point of view, I see our society at a crossroads right now where you have one camp saying that gender can be changed as many times as you want it to be. You can play with gender. And you have another camp saying that you're born your gender and that's the gender you are. And gender is meaningful. Gender has meaning. And I fall into the second camp at this time.
I just want to inform you, with no judgment from me, that if you take the position that a trans person can't be the gender that they are, that is a transphobic position. So I just want you to know that for your sake of your own information going forward. There are a lot of different ways that we could take this conversation. I guess what we're going to end up doing is trying to talk about the difference between sex and gender. So we might as well just start there, I guess. Like, what do you mean when you mean a man can't become a woman?
Yeah, so I would say I respectfully disagree with that. In my opinion, transphobic would be if you see a trans person and you want to discriminate against them, you want to hurt them, you want bad things for them. But simply disagreeing in transgender ideology, I do not believe qualifies.
That's the definition. The definition of transphobia is like you are opposed to trans people's existence as they understand it themselves. Whether you're hateful or not is not of issue here. I don't care that you're not hateful. You believe that trans people aren't who they say they are. On a fundamental level, that's a disrespect and that is a form of prejudice. I don't want to get caught up on that definition, though. I'm curious what you mean when you say that a man cannot become a woman. Like, what specifically are you thinking when you think of man and woman in that case?
Yeah, so I'm thinking if you're born a man, then you're a man based on your biology, your genitalia, and vice versa.
What does it mean to be born a man, Brad? What does it mean to be born a man?
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, as far as I know, a man's an adult, right? I don't think you can be born an adult.
Well, this is where I feel like it gets into bad faith because you know what I mean. You're born a boy, you grow up to become a man, you have male genitalia. So is genitalia your criterion for what makes you male? I would say it's the main thing. There's your biology and everything that goes into it. But
so what other biology components are there?
I mean, this is where, I don't know how to get so deep into it, but I'm just making the point that
Brad,
boy is born.
That's a great admission. That's a great admission, Brad. That's a great admission, and I'm really happy you called in. But this is where it gets really funny to me because you come in here very confident in your position and wanting to respectfully disagree as if your opinion holds water. Yet it sounds like you don't understand biology. So I'm understanding this as a medical doctor. I'm supposed to believe that your level of knowledge is just as good as mine about what biology contributes to biological sex.
Okay, but you can find people that are in my camp that have that are doctors. Just because I'm not a doctor, I'm admitting I'm not.
Their logic is dishonest, and their there are people who are doctors who have not read the studies on this particular issue, or they took embryology earlier than we learned about this particular development process in utero, or they just forgot it from when they went to med school. Because embryology is a very complex topic. And I will debate somebody who is a doctor very differently than I will debate you. But I want to make sure that I'm providing education at an appropriate level. I don't mean to sound overly pedantic, but
No,
I ask the questions I do based on I ask about very specific points of biology, because if you're going to come in here and make the claim that someone's genitalia and other unspecified biological features make them male or female, and you say that there's only like two genders and gender and sex are the same thing, I want you to understand that you are taking on a pretty heavy burden of proof, and it doesn't sound like you have a lot of education to back that up, or a lot of knowledge to back that up. So
right. So
when you say that someone's yeah, you can respond.
Okay, so I want to keep it very respectful. I think you have so far, so I appreciate that. I respect that a lot, and I want to reset. So what you're saying is fair, because I admit that I did not go to college to get a biology degree for 7 years. I admit that. So I'm not going to know all the details and the terminology. But
so let's talk about let's talk about the science then.
Okay,
do you want to discuss the science?
Okay, but can I just wrap up that point real quick? So I admit that, but like I said, you will find a lot of people in my camp that do have biology degrees that are doctors that agree with me. Obviously, you disagree with them. I understand that, but I'm saying, for the sake of this discussion, since I didn't go to school for biology and I'm not a doctor, then just keep it as simple. The terminology as simple as you can. That would be good.
Yeah. So let's talk about some real world examples, shall we? So if you say that genitalia is one factor that contributes to someone's sex, what other factors contribute? Can you list them for me, to the best of your knowledge?
Yeah. Well, I just know the general idea is that when someone's born a male, they have male characteristics, they have male biology.
Such as?
The male brain is different than the female brain.
Okay, no, but Brad, okay. What specific characteristics? Because just saying that they have male biology, male brain, male anatomy, that tells me that you don't. It tells me you don't know what features are there. So it tells me you don't know what criteria you're going to use to assign someone as male.
Okay, so you're correct that I don't know the specifics, but what I know is...
So then why are you so goddamn confident in your position when you don't even know what characteristics make a male?
You're cutting me off every 5 seconds.
No, I am going to cut you off, Brad. Brad, the reason why I'm being so aggressive right now is because you're trying to essentially say that your ignorance is just as good as the actual in-depth science that I've studied for years, and the medicine that I'm licensed to practice.
Do you agree that male biology is different than female biology? Do you agree with that?
Brad, listen, you can't even define male and female biology. So I'm going to step in here and I'm going to ask you some questions. Brad, shut up. Shut up. I have little patience for you right now. I'm going to give you some scenarios, okay? Okay, so if somebody has a penis, is that a male feature or a female feature?
As a male feature.
Okay. If someone has XY chromosomes, is that a male feature or a female feature?
It's been a while since I've taken biology. I'm assuming male.
Okay. If someone has a uterus, is that a male feature or a female feature?
As a female feature.
Okay. If someone has XX chromosomes, is that a male feature or a female feature?
That's a female feature.
All right. If somebody has both XX chromosomes and a penis, are they male or female?
Okay, this I'm going to answer. No dodge. But just let me talk. I'm going to answer. Okay. This is where I'm good
answer the
faith.
question.
That's what I'm in the middle of doing. Okay.
Okay.
This is where man. All right, let me know when it's my turn to speak.
Yeah,
There's
go
a
ahead.
delay, Brad. Sometimes we say things like, okay, and it comes out like we're interrupting you, but it's just because there's a little delay. You can go ahead now, bud.
Okay, I see. So, okay, that's good. So, this is where I'm being in good faith and intellectually honest, because I'm not here for, I'm here for an honest discussion. So, what you just asked,
Brad, don't give me the disclaimer. Just answer the question. Answer the question.
So, you want every answer to be 5 seconds?
No, but I don't want
it's
you
a
to
very
give
simple
excuses.
question.
It's a simple
He
yes or
asked
no
you,
question.
is a person male or female? So there's only two
okay,
answers to
this
that
is-
question. It should be quick and easy for you to answer is the idea
Yeah.
here.
Okay, this is the answer. If they're born with both, I honestly don't know, but you're talking about 1%. So for that 1%, I don't know. But for the 99%, you're born a male or a female.
But that 1% are still people, right?
Yes, of course. Everyone's a child of God.
So that
I said that in the beginning of the conversation.
So Brad, so those individual people, that's their whole life, right? Like you're born in your body, and that's for your entire life. You exist in that one body that you have, correct?
Correct.
So those people, even if they're a small 1% of the population, they still have to go about their everyday life, right? Like, and they deserve to go about their lives not being harassed by other people. They deserve to have access to bathrooms in public. They deserve to not have to be the subject of random conversations about what their genitals are, right? Like they deserve basic human respect and dignity, right?
Yes, of course. I agree with that.
So they're the people that are exceptions to whatever you think the majority rule is. There are still exceptions that exist, and they are real people, correct?
Yes, correct.
So there are some people who are not clearly male or female in the exact definitions that many of society will use, correct?
Yes.
Why are trans people not an exception in that way? So you agree that there are exceptions. Why are you so hell-bent on not allowing trans people to also be an exception when you clearly don't know how you even define male and female from the beginning? Like you can't point out traits that would assign somebody to either category. And I gave you examples of like these are real examples of people who have incongruence in their traits. And if you're deciding that everybody fits one of these two boxes and their identity has to match the biological box that they're in, that's not how the world works. Like there are people, in fact, have you heard of a condition called androgen insensitivity?
No, I haven't.
So this condition is fascinating. So you have somebody
can
who.
Can I say one thing real quick before we get too
Brad, because I'm trying to teach you here. I'm trying to teach you here.
All right, cool.
There are
It's
people
a very two-sided conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are people with androgen insensitivity. So your hormones drive a lot of how your anatomy looks. So if you have high levels of testosterone in an XY fetus with testes, all of those agreed together, and the testosterone surge causes causes primarily external anatomy to develop, and then there's another subset of testosterone called 5-DHT, which causes like internal anatomy, et cetera, to develop, or some combination of the testosterone and DHT allow external and internal anatomy to develop. And these are actually separate processes, in fact. So what happens with androgen insensitivity, you have a fetus that is genetically male and has internal male anatomy, but has external female anatomy. Because the level of testosterone, the testosterone itself was there, but the receptors that it binds to were not very active. So it is as if it didn't have testosterone in utero. But what does happen, so you have this baby that has internal male anatomy and external female anatomy, and then they hit puberty, and then they grow external male anatomy. But that child is often told that they're a girl, like from birth, because that's how they look on the outside. That's how they're assigned. They grow up, they hit puberty, and they change. So there are examples of people who biologically, their sex changes as they grow up, if you're defining their sex on external anatomy. So when someone like that, how can you honestly say that sex and gender are the same thing? They're only two categories, and they are always in agreement. I'll let you speak now.
Okay. So I think we need to have two separate categories, because if you're talking about the 1% that are born with male and female characteristics that are the exception to the rule, I'm being honest, I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on that. That's way above my pay grade. I don't know. But if you're talking about the 99%,
that was my whole point.
that are born,
That's my whole point, Brad. The fact that I don't think you're educated enough in this subject matter to have such a strong opinion that you do.
You're talking about two separate things.
I think you need to be. No, they are not two separate things at all. They're not. We treat these people
you're saying
the
a
same
baby.
medically.
Hold on, I want to ask.
Yeah.
You're saying a baby that is born with all male characteristics is the same as a baby that is born with male and female characteristics.
I'm saying you can't know based on one criteria at all. Like you can't look at someone's external anatomy and say, I know exactly what the rest of your system is like. You can't do that, because we have enough exceptions to say that without confirmation of all of those things, you cannot guarantee that somebody is completely congruent.
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah, I want to let Lux jump in here.
Yeah. I would love to ask you a question, Brad. I'm really curious what you think. So we agree that there are biological exceptions, right? You're totally on board. You admit that you don't know very much about it, but you're fine with those people existing. That's cool. Okay, so let's say that a person is born with very obvious genitalia that is it's very clearly ambiguous. You know, it's not like one of those ones where they're born one way and then they find out later that there's something different, right? Let's just say the baby that is born with like both genitalia, let's say, freak incident, very rarely happens, whatever. Do you think that baby can identify as a boy?
I mean, a baby? No, they don't have the... you mean
as they grow up, like if they're a toddler, let's say, can that baby say, I'm a boy, I like playing with boy toys, I like being a boy? Like, is that something that you would say is okay? And you would be like, yes, that's normal.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand the question. You're saying if they're born with mixed characteristics, can they then grow up to identify as a male?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm agnostic on it. I don't know enough about it. I mean, I do want to point out...
Okay, let me rephrase the question. I want to rephrase the question then. I'll put it to you a different way.
Okay, go.
Do you think that person should be required to identify as non-binary? Like in the same way that like we have a baby girl, she's born, she has a vulva, and we say that's a girl, she's our princess, and we continue to treat her like a girl as she grows up. And in your position, that should always be the case. She should always identify as female, right? If you have an intersex baby, should that baby be raised non-binary and made to identify as that because it's congruent with their sex? Or would you say that it's okay for that baby to grow up and feel like, actually, I think I'm a boy?
I would say there needs to be a way to determine what the biology actually is.
So you think that the biology of an intersex child means that they must be raised as a non-binary person?
No, I don't believe that. I use the wrong word. So
you believe that sex and gender are different things? If you believe
y'all want
that
want 1 second answers, okay?
Okay, yeah, because cool. I'm trying to drive to a point. I'm trying to build to a broader point here, Brad. which is that I'm demonstrating to you a situation in which you think that sex and gender can be different things. So if a kid is born with intersex condition, biologically they are not male or female in a clear, distinct way. If you think that that person can grow up to identify as a boy and grow up and be like, I'm going to wear a tuxedo to my wedding, then you understand at least one situation in which sex and gender are not exactly the same thing. So what would be the difference then between that intersex kid identifying as man versus someone who's born female in all phenotypical ways, identifying as a man and being treated that way in society? Like, what's the difference between those things is kind of what I'm trying to drive toward.
Okay, I can give you my answer. I do just want to point out it's your guys' show, and I respect that, but I've let you guys go on like 5-minute answers, and then I can't get out 2 seconds. I do want to point that out.
I know it's unfair. I know, and I acknowledge that, and it's still going to be unfair sometimes. I'm sorry. But please, I'm really interested to know what your answer is to this very specific question.
Okay. I want to point out again, this is the 1% exception to the rule, but with this 1% exception, the difference is if you have a baby born with 100% male characteristics, then that is objectively a male. Now, if they're born with 50% male, 50% female characteristics, then that's a weird gray area that I don't know about. But to answer your question, I think there should be a way to objectively determine what is their gender, and that should be their gender.
Brad, what criterion would that be? So this is what I've been trying to get you to say as well. What criterion, if everything's 50%, if it's 50 and 50%, what is the one thing that puts them over the edge? What's the one thing that matters more than all the other characteristics that would assign them to one sex or another?
That's a tough question. I don't have an answer for. I admit if I don't know, then I don't know. Great. I admit I don't know about that.
Great. So respectfully, Brad, like I keep saying, you don't know enough to weigh in on this because
I don't know enough about the 1%. I do know about the 99%.
And so you should refrain. And so you should refrain. And so you should refrain from being overly confident about shit you don't know about.
From the 1%, I refrain. From the 99%, no, I do not refrain.
The problem is, Brad, there's an example that we explained to you why your view is inconsistent. That view extends, like that issue extends to the rest of the situation too. Because in order to be consistent, you have to move the goalpost and you have to pick something different every time to decide that is the primary thing that assigns you to a sex. My definition of sex is that it is a conglomeration of multiple different characteristics, and they don't always agree. And so my view of sex is not as rigid and is not as binary because there are an almost infinite amount of combinations that you can have, and I acknowledge that. And so my perspective is consistent because I'm not hinging that viewpoint on one characteristic and then changing that definition when somebody else's scenario doesn't meet my previously defined definition. So your rigidity on this and your lack of knowledge combined makes a very logically sticky situation for you because you cannot clearly define you want these things to be clearly defined, but you can't do it. And reality does not work in a way that allows you to do that. So that's where I was trying to get at the beginning is like, if you have people that you know that are like, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt for your percentage of 1%. Let's say 1% of the population has an incongruence. What factor is the most important there to assign them if you view that sex has to be rigid?
Okay, can I answer like more than 30 seconds? Because this is not like a 2-second answer.
Depending on what you say.
Yeah, so this is not a respectful conversation. Like, if you're going to jump in, if I say something you don't like...
No, I'm jumping in whenever you Dunning-Kruger your way through a point. Because the thing is, you can't say, I don't know much about this thing.
And then misrepresented my position.
Brad, shut the fuck up. You cannot say the argument that you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know this particular point, and then proceed to shrug that off as if you're a complete expert about the rest of the 99%, which clearly you are not. You know what you've been taught previously, but you are woefully uninformed, and you refuse to learn. You're refusing to learn from other people about things that you think you know. And I'm telling you, what you think you know is not enough. You need to embrace the things that you don't understand and kind of think beyond what your preconceived biases are. And like maybe go take some science classes.
Okay, I don't see how I've been inconsistent, because I admitted on the 1%
you don't see it
where
because you're not following very well. And again, I feel like a lot of this goes to a lack of knowledge. And it's the thing that, like, I get that you're trying to be respectful in all this, but like the issue that I'm having the problem with, like let's say, like Brad, is there a subject that you're particularly skilled at? Like what do you do for work? Or a hobby or whatever?
I work as a salesman.
A salesman. Okay. So I don't know anything about money. Like I'm absolute shit with money. But like, there are people out there who are scammers, right? Who don't know anything and who try to tell people that they know things about money or know things about sales. And then they'll like steer people in the wrong direction. Have you ever met somebody like that who just is so uninformed about sales and uninformed about marketing, and then they try to pass themselves off as experts?
Sure. I mean, you asked me a question.
If somebody like that told you that you were wrong about sales, no, if someone told you that you were wrong about sales and marketing, and they have never done sales in their life for a single day, and they just keep making the argument, oh, well, I don't know about this thing, but I just know that you're wrong about it. Would you take that person seriously? Would you think that their opinion is equally as valid as yours? Like that's why I'm frustrated right now. Like, no, that's what this is why I'm so frustrated, because this is something that I am very well educated in, and I've demonstrated areas of knowledge that I have in this that you don't. And you've taken that and you're like, I guess I don't know the answer to that question, but I actually know all these things about this other side of it, which I've demonstrated that you do not know those things.
There's people that disagree with you that have more knowledge than you. Just because
I told you,
I
don't actually think that's true.
I will debate them.
I don't actually think that's true. I think that's a lie, because any of these biologists that do they specialize in trans care? Are they trans themselves? Is there any specific reason why they would have done research on this topic? You say biology like that's some claim to authority on literally every subject of biology, but like there are different specializations. A biologist could study fucking algae. A biologist could study zebras. A biologist could study the atmosphere. Like there are so many different disciplines within that one thing. And just because someone who has no reference of knowledge, Brad, somebody has no reference of knowledge, like you're speaking to a medical doctor, Dr. Ben, a medical doctor who is trans, who performs
gender-affirming care.
Dr. Ben.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a fallacy claim to authority what you're doing, because
more knowledge than
you claimed that your friends are biologists.
Yeah, and there are doctors who have more knowledge than me. There are a lot of doctors that have more knowledge than me about sex and gender, and I respect those people, and they have more progressive views than I do most of the time. Like the doctors that are cited in like the detransition cases and all that stuff, they're like usually not. Yeah, it's like a dentist, it's like a cardiologist or something that's not related, and they just give the argument from authority that they know shit. The difference between me and those people is that I'm here on the air right now actually giving the information, and I can cite my sources. I can point you to embryology textbooks. I can point you to embryologists. I can point you to endocrinologists. I can point you to the American Society of Endocrinology. I can point you to all of these places with the people who do know more than I do, and I can actually meet my burden of proof. You can't meet your burden of proof, and you don't have the education level to back that up. Same thing with the physicians that oppose gender affirming care, which look at all of the medical organizations that have a stance supporting gender affirming care. You have the American Association of the American Academy of Pediatrics, you have the American Academy of Family Physicians, you have the AMA, you have the ACP, you have the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. You have all these expert boards that agree with me and reject the opinions of whatever doctors you're talking about. So if you want to bring some of that knowledge to the table, if you want to start citing some expertise, bring some citations, bring some data to the table. But don't bring an argument like from authority when you're not going to bring data and you're not going to bring citations. But if you're going off your own base level of knowledge, I'm not convinced that that's enough to really make any claim to confidence in this discussion.
Got it. Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's gotten a little bit heated, understandably so. You guys are passionate about this topic. I respect that. But okay, honest question, right? Can you see why most people believe that if a baby is born with all male characteristics, that baby is a male? That's not such a far-fetched idea.
Brett, can you understand that the majority of people are undereducated in this topic?
I'm just not seeing, if you're born with all male characteristics, how's that not make you a male?
Do you think that because an idea is popular, do you think that because an argument is popular, that it's correct?
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, then if you're born with all male characteristics.
Yeah, I can see why people think that, because they're poorly educated on the subject matter. People that are poorly educated on the subject matter believe a lot of bullshit.
It doesn't seem like you need to have like a biology degree to just use the logic that if a baby has all male characteristics, then it's objectively male.
Brad, because you're using logic that ignores the nuance, right? It's overly simplified.
And that's what people are arguing from. When we're talking about babies, we're guessing. I want to interject here. I know this is a conversation that Ben has a lot of expertise on, but I want to make sure that I'm still getting my words in here, because I think that I can help kind of bring this together a little bit. Like,
that's fair.
Oh my God. Yeah. So this conversation gets really difficult to have when we're reducing things down to a like single thing or like a lack of complexity, which is what tends to happen when you're like, okay, well, common sense says if you look at the baby and it has a penis, it's probably male. Like, okay, that may be true many times, but that is still just a guess. You still can't know if that kid is going to grow up and have an intersex condition that is not obvious until they're in puberty, right? Like they could have developed partially, or they're not going to develop later or whatever. Partial androgen insensitivity, things like that. When we're looking at a baby, we're still just guessing their biology. And then there's the additional question of them having a gender that is different. So like coming back to the other example, if a baby that is born with obvious ambiguity can grow up, and I don't know what you think should happen. Like, should a kid be forced to go through like extensive years of genetic testing? And meanwhile, what do you raise the kid as? Do you let them cut their hair? Do you make them grow it out? Like, you're saying like the gender identity has to be based on like a blood quantity level of male versus female traits. And like, that seems silly. So it seems like the easier position to take would be to say like, I acknowledge that I don't know very much about this, and therefore people who know a lot more about it have a rigorous scientific means of coming to their understanding. Because what you presented this as, Brad, as like, we have an ideology that we're entrenched in. And when you have an ideology that you're entrenched in, you will find evidence that corroborates your perspective, which is what you are doing when you come to us and you say, well, all these other people who I can't even name agree with my position that trans ideology is bad. And like, we are telling you, like, Ben is an expert, and all of these medical associations are full of experts who study this scientifically. They have tested what has the best outcomes And it turns out that trans people just are trans, and that's okay. And like, whether you personally believe that on like a spiritual level, someone can change fundamentally, like if you believe ontologically that like someone who's born male is always a male, like I am not necessarily trying to get you off of that position. That is a transphobic position. I'm just trying to say like that is not a good reason to vote against the interests of trans people. And it's also not a good reason for you to say like, for you to say that you don't know should be your willingness to say, and therefore I will only listen. But you want to have like equal time as us to talk on this show when you should be coming to this as a student who's here to learn from a teacher who's willing to give you the time of day and answer your questions, no matter how overtly offensive they are. So like, I guess like I don't know where else we can take this conversation at this point. I don't know. Do you want to pitch in anything, Brad?
Yeah, I want to say you guys keep talking about how much more you know about human biology than I do. I acknowledge that. I'm not an expert in human biology, but my
why
point
is the
is
response then not to accept our position?
saying, hold on. My point is,
So Brad, my point was with that.
Oh my
so
goodness.
stop being so
good.
confident. Why are you so confident when there's so much you don't know? Like, are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger curve? Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger curve?
Let me finish. Yeah. I'm about to answer. I'm about to answer your question.
There are people who are way smarter than you, Brad, that are less confident in their answer because there's so much more nuance that we have to sift through. There's a lot of times where I am not as confident in my answer on these subjects because there's so much nuance. And so that's where I take a step back and I say, you know what? I need to do some more like studying on this. And this is what we get into as well, is that a lot of the rhetoric in the public discourse is uninformed because of Dunning-Kruger, right? It's the people who are the loudest are oftentimes the least informed, and they are the most confident, but still the least informed. And the people who know shit end up not saying anything because we're on this other end of like, oh, I don't know if I'm smart enough at this subject. I don't know if I'm the most up to date. And we get imposter syndrome and we say, maybe I shouldn't speak because somebody else knows more than me. And then what ends up happening is the people with no information are like, see, these experts aren't saying anything, therefore I'm right. And that's the issue that we're coming to. And common sense is not reliable at all. Common sense can lead you to a variety of very, very bad conclusions.
Okay,
so I think your framework is horrendous for how you evaluate information and how you present your level of confidence.
Okay, can I ask you a question? So,
yeah,
are you saying that there's no experts in human biology that disagree with you guys?
That's not what I did not say anything like that.
Okay,
there
so
are
why
experts
do I need to be, why do I need to be
here's the thing. Here's the thing, though, Brad. In human biology, that's again a very broad topic. An expert in human biology is different than an expert in reproductive embryology or an expert in like reproductive genetics or experts in gender as a social construct or in gender in general or even an expert in like something specifically relevant. And again, where I go with this, if you have an expert that disagrees with me, I'm open to the challenge. I'm open to talking with them. I'm open to reading their publications. But you have to cite sources. You have to cite them. You have to actually bring the data to the table. You can't just claim that an expert agrees with you and have me believe that. Right? You have to back that up with data. And then I will go in and I will say, is this data sound? And is the arguments are based on validity and soundness in order to, be a convincing argument. So validity, it has to be logical. It has to actually follow a reasonable form of argumentation that is consistent and not fallacious. And on the other side, the information has to be true. Right. So
it just so happens that all of the major medical organizations have already looked over all of this research and come to the opposite conclusion that you're presenting here, basically, is what we're saying.
So,
yes,
so if
you might have one study, but that doesn't hold up to the body of evidence.
Yeah, and so if you have people that disagree, and if somebody comes up with some new information that we hadn't looked at, then we have to go in and evaluate that data. But if that's the case, bring the citation, bring the information. Don't just say that there are people that disagree. Bring the data to the table, and let's talk about the data.
Can I ask you a question? Because I'm interested in the answer. This answer will be interesting, actually. So you mentioned this before. I have a question about it, okay? Let's say the baby is born with all male characteristics. Let's say they grow up to be an adult and still have all male characteristics. Their entire life, they have all male characteristics. What are the nuances that can make them actually female in that case?
Oh, that's a great question.
How are you
I love that
defining
question
all
so much.
male characteristics? Yeah, but I kind of want Lex to.
Yeah, well, I mean, so when we biologically observe characteristics and cluster them, what we find in human dimorphism is the word for it. When you have like two different like presentations, we typically have these male and female presentations, but we look at like a huge range of characteristics because there are a ton of characteristics that relate to biological sex. Like we could point to breasts and say, okay, breasts are a female characteristic, they feed the babies. Ovaries are a female characteristic. A vulva is a female characteristic. Some people, this expands out and they say things like long hair is a female characteristic, which some people may not agree with. Whatever. Well, I'm just saying, like, we look at a cluster of characteristics, right? And even within populations that seem like they are mostly falling into one category or the other, have an extreme level of variation between these things. Like male gymnasts at the Olympic level ring in some of the lowest levels of testosterone of like male athletes whose testosterone gets checked on a regular basis, but they're still like top tier athletes, right? But they might have testosterone levels that almost are like not within the normative male range. So we look at so many different characteristics that we end up with what's called a bimodal distribution. So you have like basically a line that has a bump on one side, a dip in the middle, and then a bump on the other side, and then a dip again on the outside. So you've got like only very rare times do you have extreme high estrogen and extreme big boobs, like all these extreme female characteristics all the way, through a variety of different traits, right? So if we can acknowledge this wide variety within just sex characteristics, it becomes difficult to define, right? Like if you acknowledge that there's this level of variation. So like there is an argument to be made that like a trans person has a trait that is female when they have all the other biological traits are male. Like having a neurology that causes you to want to transition or to state that you are trans, that is part of that person. It is part of how they understand their own biology. And it's not like they don't realize that they're male. That's the whole point of being trans. We all acknowledge I was born this way, but I feel this way, and I'm going to use this medical treatment to change it, right? So we can change genitals. We can remove gonads. We can grow breasts. Like all these things can be changed and even just changed by taking one pill in the morning. You get all these incredible effects, and trans women smell like women and their skin is soft like women. And so it's like, what do you point at as the one singular characteristic that defines male or female if we are able to change all of these different things, which is when we tend to end up in a conversation about chromosomes or about genitals or something. So it's like there's such a wide variation on how we define sex that like trans people change or can change almost all of the relevant sex characteristics that we point at when we think male or female. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think the debate, like I said in the beginning, it's not hatred towards anybody. What I'm interested in is seeing, is this healthy for the individual? Is this healthy for society? So
you know who has a great answer for that, Brad? Brad, again, this is an example of where you are woefully undereducated, because guess who has an answer about safety and outcomes for people's health? Guess who has it?
You're going to say transgender people?
No. All of the medical organizations that have data, years and years and years of data, they have it. It's available to read. It's available to find from the American Academy of Endocrinology. Like these things exist. We have the data, and you just haven't read it.
Okay.
So there's your answer, buddy. There's your answer. You need to be educated more.
You would acknowledge. Would you acknowledge every particular institution has their agenda, and if you're living in a social climate where you get encouraged and rewarded for reporting positive
Brad,
things?
Are you saying that the scientific method? Are you, Brad? Do you believe in medicine as a whole? Do you if you had chest pain and you went to the hospital, would you follow their advice about like getting admitted, like maybe going to the cath lab? Like if you seriously thought you were dying, would you trust medical professionals to take care of you?
I mean, I would never be in that position. I mean,
you would never have a heart attack.
I'm not just going to blindly trust them, because if you go to the doctor and say you're sad, first thing they're going to do is prescribe you antidepressants.
Brad, if you were in a car accident, and you were bleeding out uncontrollably, would you want somebody to give you medical care, or would you want to die on the side of the road? Like, what do you want there?
Yeah, I would want medical care, of course.
Okay. Who determines what standards of medical care would save you in that circumstance? Like who determines that trauma surgery is a good idea to do for someone who's like bleeding out from being in a car wreck?
This is a universal truth. Nobody's going to say don't save somebody that's dying.
No, but who determines how much blood somebody needs? Who determines what hematocrit is the goal to prevent someone from dying? Who decides what is a healthy level of testosterone for a cisgender man? Who decides what migraine medicine is going to be okay for the majority of the population? Who decides, like, how do these guidelines come into play? Do you know?
I'm assuming through the science community, the medical community.
Yeah, so the same medical organizations that decide how gender-affirming care is used and how safe it is, those are the same standards of evidence that we use to determine if trauma surgery is a good idea. It's the same evidence, the same standard of evidence, the same organizations that weigh in on if you should, how reliable an EKG is to determine if you're having a heart attack, how reliable open heart surgery is. It's the same information that gives us every standard of health practice that we have. And so if you decide that you don't agree with science as a whole, then okay, have fun dying on the side of the road in a car accident, because that, like, and you have every right to not accept medical care. Like, you have every right to die on the side of the road. But if you accept that the burden of proof has been met for trauma surgeons, but it has not been met for gender-affirming care, and all of the guidelines are established in the same way, then you are preferentially granting merit to one type of healthcare and not another, and that is prejudice.
Can I respond why this is a flawed argument, why this is a logical fallacy?
It's not a fallacy, but go ahead. What fallacy is it?
Okay. It sounds like you're saying because the medical field is correct on certain things, I should just blindly trust them across the board 100% of the time.
Brad, what do you mean by blindly trust? Because it's not blind to trust mountains and mountains.
Right about these things.
Is blindness is having mountains and mountains of data a blind analysis? What the fuck is your standard for evidence?
Where the data came.
What is your standard of evidence?
I have to interpret the data.
Didn't you say that you're
I have to see what's their agenda.
How come your standard of evidence? How come your standard of evidence is lower for your God than it is for medicine?
I didn't bring God into this.
This is incredible.
I don't know what you're talking about. No,
you said at the beginning that you believe in God. Everyone is a child of God. You have a lower standard of evidence for your God than you do for the American medical system.
Yeah, this is just a personal tech. I said
we
in the beginning,
tangible data.
The only time I
tangible data less than you trust a book from the Bronze Age.
Yeah, I never said that. I never talked about the Bible once in this conversation. I said in the very beginning.
Do you believe in the Bible?
Do
you trust the Bible? What do you mean
think it's probably. Go ahead.
What? Yeah, what do you think of the Bible?
Go ahead. I mean, I'm agnostic. I think it's got wisdom. Some I like, some I don't. I mean, what's this have to do with
said that we were
transgenderism?
Children of God at the beginning. Do you not mean that?
Yeah, in the very beginning, I said my personal belief is everyone's a children of God, whether you take it literal or metaphorical. So you can be an atheist and believe in that in the metaphorical sense that we're all brothers and sisters in humanity. That's the only time I mention God. From that point going forward, I've only been using secular arguments.
Yeah, but do you believe in God literally or metaphorically when you first said that?
Yes, I believe in God, but this has nothing to do with the transgender argument. Now you're just going to
attack me for being your standard of evidence. What we're trying to drive toward is that you seem to think that you get to read the studies, you get to decide which research is valid, you get to be the one, you have to use your special void discernment. But you don't know anything about this, and you're trying to say that all of these experts who have studied this for their entire career have a bias and an agenda, not that they follow a rigorous process of coming to the truth. And meanwhile, you are willing to accept like fundamental truths about the universe based on very little evidence. Actually, what you do and what you just admitted is that you pick and choose what you like, no matter what the subject is, whether it's the Bible or whether it's evidence related to transgender care, you just pick what you already agree with. You are admitting that openly, that evidence doesn't matter to you. You're trying to use a secular argument. You are weaponizing secular arguments to make a religious statement that we are all ontologically the gender that we were assigned at birth because God or something. Like, whether you state that officially as your opinion or not, that's what you're doing. You're justifying your ideological position by twisting scientific, like you are pretending to care about the rigor of science in order to trick us into thinking that you care about the rigor of science, but you don't. You don't care about the rigor of science because you're willing to just decide that science is invalid when it produces a result that you don't agree with, Brad. Are you not recognizing that that's what you're doing?
This is what I'm recognizing. I use secular arguments the entire time. I never said I believe this because of the Bible or religion or anything like that. So I don't know where you got that from.
Brad,
I use secular arguments the entire time.
We are targeting. We are
experts, and I keep telling you, there's experts that
your
disagree
standard
with
of evidence is inconsistent. Your standard of evidence is inconsistent. Your arguments are inconsistent. Your confidence in yourself and your arguments are way out of proportion to what you actually know. And I think you're not willing to listen. You're not willing to learn from people who have different expertise than you do. And I think this is kind of a pointless conversation at this point. Like, unless you're willing to listen, I think maybe we're done here.
Yeah, I mean, you said you're an expert many times. There's experts that disagree with you. So not every expert is on your side.
Bring your data, Brad. Bring the data. Don't just say that they're experts that disagree. Bring citations.
If you want to actually bring the data, bring an article at least that we can talk about. Because like you're just saying, oh, well, these other people who I've decided that I like better than you say something else. And then you're saying, even though the majority of people who study this have all concluded that trans people are valid and we should let them have access to treatment and like legal recognition, you've just decided that an extreme minority, you're like a flat earther, dude. Like, I don't know. Arden has said it a couple times in chat. You are literally like a flat earther right now. Or like somebody who doesn't believe in evolution, where you're deciding that fringe people who have no credentials or like unrelated credentials or like their work is not being put through the same kind of peer review. They're publishing things without peer review. You're like, those people are the experts and that's the person I'm going to listen to because you are confirming your beliefs by finding that you're cherry picking the things that are going to confirm what you believe. And you can just say, well, you have an agenda to ignore anything that disagrees with your position, even though it's not like we're just deciding that this is the truth. If there was evidence that said that trans kids shouldn't get puberty blockers for some reason, if it showed that it was really harming them in some way, I would say, okay, well then we need to have a conservative approach to this and maybe wait a couple extra years or something. But that's not what the data shows. My position is flexible to the actual process of studying good outcomes. And we have determined scientifically through the rigor of repeat experiments and trying this with different populations over the course of many years that trans care is a good thing. It results in positive outcomes, that trans people can be functional and well-adjusted members of their communities, valued members of their communities, experts in their fields, like Ben. And it's not bad for society either, because trans people have existed throughout all of human culture, in every single continent. In some context, trans people have always been here. So you can't just claim that, like, oh, this is a societal ill because it's brand new. It's not new. So I don't think that we have anything further to discuss if you take the position that all of the scientific consensus on this matter is invalid.
No, what I'm saying is, I don't have the article on hand, but what I'm saying is there's experts that disagree with you guys, and then you guys are just telling me, oh, well, they're fake experts. They're not legitimate. Okay, well, how do I know that?
No,
I'm just going to take your word for it.
Brad, I've told you, bring your citations. If your argument holds any water, bring the data.
And
I will not
You're welcome to
entertain
call
this
back.
without the data. Yeah, so
And
go do your homework,
we're
bring back the data,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about the data.
I know we're wrapping things up, and I appreciate the conversation. I do just have one last question, though. What does me believing in God or not have to do with transgenderism? Why did you ask me that?
It has to do with
I
your
asked you
standard of
because-
evidence.
Yeah, standard of evidence, exactly. And if you don't understand standard of evidence, that's a huge red flag for us also. Because it shows that you don't know how to evaluate. Because it tells me
being
you,
a theist
tells
or
me that
atheist,
you
what's
don't
that to do
know,
with the argument?
Brad. It tells me how well you understand how to evaluate evidence and how to evaluate your position. Because if your position can stand up to scrutiny, you should be able to figure that out. And that's why logic exists. That's why science exists. It's so we learn how to obtain data, how to evaluate the data, and how to make conclusions based on that data. And I think in addition to a science class, I think you should take a logic class too, like a rhetoric class. It'd be really good for you.
I'm still just not seeing what believing in God or not has to do with transgenderism.
Go look up standard of evidence.
Yeah, Brad, you are willing to believe in God without basically any evidence, but you are not willing to believe that trans people deserve health care and that and transitioning is healthy for them, even though there is a mountain of evidence that you could very easily dig into. So that's why it's relevant. Like, your willingness to believe in something based on what the evidence is relevant, regardless of what the issue is. You could be a flat earther. And I would also call that into question as, like, you are not capable of assessing the information that's available and come to a reasonable conclusion. Like, basically is the point here. And it is relevant because this is an atheist show. So we're going to talk about God sometimes.
Another position.
I mean, I'm saying that it is indicative of your ability to process information. Yes, it's relevant.
Okay, so if you're wrong about anything, then you can never be right about anything else.
No, but you accept something. So do you understand what the burden of proof is, Brad?
Yeah, but here's the thing. I admit I could be wrong about God.
Do you understand?
I admit I could be wrong.
Do you understand that there's certain things?
Do you think you could be wrong about the trans issue, Brad?
Yeah,
do you think you could be wrong?
And
so why are you still arguing?
I could be wrong and you could be wrong.
Yeah.
So anybody could be wrong about anything.
Do you understand that there's certain things that require a lower threshold of evidence to be believable? Trans people is not a supernatural issue. It is very much a biological, sociological, real-world Earth issue that has a lower threshold of evidence, a lower burden of proof to meet than the God claim. The God claim requires a lot more evidence to prove. And with the trans discussion, there is a mountain of evidence. I've listed many sources to you that you can go look up on your own. And it's met its burden of proof. It continues to meet its burden of proof. The God claim has not. Like, if you've watched any other shows on this channel, there has not been an argument that meets the burden of proof for God. And if you do have one, I mean, call the other shows on this channel, because we'd love to hear your argument for God. But the point is, you're willing to believe something with a much higher burden of proof and not believe something with a lower burden of proof that has met its burden. And that's where it's weird. That's where we're questioning your ability to think through the evidence.
Okay, can I tell you? Okay, this is where I see
I
a
think we're
difference.
done. I think we're done here, Brad. I think we're done. Because we're just going in
I think in
circles
the
now. I think we're
future,
done.
if you want to bring
Okay,
us
well-
some actual, like, this expert said this, and here's the evidence, and here's the study, and here's the article, and I have it ready, and I can read it to you now.
You're just going to call me a transphobe. So
We can evaluate the standard of evidence together. But I think in the meantime, maybe you could read like 10 studies, and maybe you could like not pick ones that only agree with you, and you'll find that like 9 out of 10 of those studies don't agree with you. And like maybe actually sift through the research yourself if you think that you're such a smart boy and your evaluation is more important and better than people who literally spend their entire fucking day doing this as their job. But, you know, I think we're done for today. We really appreciate the vigorous energy that we've brought to the conversation. And if you would like to call back in the future, you're welcome to do so. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, and call
Right.
the Sunday
I did
show
not want to give him
and other shows about. No, but in case he's still watching, like go call the Sunday show or other shows about your God claims, because that would be fun to get into.
That's why I want to go on the other shows. I haven't argued with a theist in a long time about the actual meat of their whatever. I'm all like focused on trans stuff right now, but it's fun sometimes to you know poke at the God beliefs and everything. They fall into the same kind of like rational tricks where they're like, I've decided that this matters and this other thing doesn't, and I've decided to set aside my ability to evaluate information because I want to preserve my belief, which is what Brad is doing. Like, I don't know if everybody's aware of this, if you're clear on this in the comments, but like that is like, I've just decided that I need to preserve this belief and I'm going to reject everything you say. If this person is like, I want to change my mind or I want to come and learn from you as experts, then they're more likely to say stuff like, oh gosh, I didn't know that. Or, oh wow, I'll have to read about that more, instead of repeatedly going, well, that doesn't count. Well, that's only 1%. And like shifting the goalposts and like not actually answering the question that we've just asked because he wants to complain about the fact that we won't give him as much time to talk. But like, you're not realizing that you don't know this thing. And therefore you need to be like, wow, I find that really interesting. And if you disagree with all this experts, then like maybe I should find out what the people who disagree with me think, you know, go. We need more people in the world like Harris Bomber Guy, who when he finds that people are agreeing with him, he gets uncomfortable and he's like, I need to find out what the opposition says, because when people agree with me, I feel like maybe that means that I'm wrong about something. Like have the self-awareness that we're just big dumb primates and we don't know things.
Yeah,
anyway,
and it's just that level of confidence with very little knowledge that grinds my gears. I don't mind when people are less informed. Like, it's okay. Like, there are plenty of things, like everyone is less informed about something, but it's maintaining a high level of confidence despite a lack of knowledge that is very concerning to me. Like, have some humility.
Yeah.
That would make everything a lot easier.
Got my blood pumping though. Like, I feel very activated.
I told people
right
like
now.
I have no patience. I have like very little patience today for bullshit, and I think Brad found that out today.
Yeah. Okay, I want to look at the schedule for next week. I just want to take a little bit of a break before we move on to a new caller. Or do we not? We don't have a schedule for next week because it's April. Okay, we don't have a schedule exactly for next week, but don't forget that we have shows pretty much every day of the week. Turn on your notifications. Make sure you're getting that information. Probably there's going to be some Forrest next week, I would bet. I bet there's going to be some Matt Dillahunty next week. And I bet that we're going to have TACIS and that there will be 2 hosts. So make sure you're checking in next week to see what all's going on.
I bet the hosts of TACIS are going to be trans. I bet they're getting more trans people on. Just going to take a guess.
Are you sure? Skeptical.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm skeptical that trans people will be on TACIS, but
that's a good position to have. You know, you never know. The sun might rise in the west tomorrow. So don't forget to hit the like button, everybody. You know, that's a quick, easy, free way for you to support the show. We've got like 500 people in here right now, but only like 200 likes. Pump up those numbers, please. And don't forget that your $5 or more super chats will be read aloud by us at the end, and you can vote with your hashtag Team Ben or hashtag Team Luxander, whichever one you want to,
don't
contribute
forget to hashtag lemon shirt or hashtag lemons for your favorite host. That everyone should just hashtag that. But
and hashtag skull. I have skulls on my hoodie, but I also have a skull tattoo. So skull.
No, just forget about that one. Just lemons. Don't even bother with that. Just lemon. Yeah,
sure.
It's not electioneering. I can do what I want. I'm not trying to influence
and if you guys
the
don't
voter
know,
base.
I mean, listen. So my birthday is this week. So this is my birthday TACIS show. So super chat.
So you're definitely gonna lose. Yeah, because we all know that when you want something, they don't make it happen. So
it's true. I know.
Yeah.
But what if I want to lose? Because the fun thing
wants to give the
I'm
argument.
so good at it. I'm good at it. Yeah. So don't forget to vote on the poll in the chat right there. We've got 3 positions that the loser will have to defend. It's a fun little game that we play at the end of the show when we get done with super chats. Whoever gets the fewest votes from the super chats has to defend a silly position. And I think I voted on it earlier, but now I can't see the poll. So I think one of them was like, you have to, what?
Yeah, there's defend your choice for gay anthem, gender assigned by Magic 8 Ball, or HRT should come in Pez dispensers. Those are the choices.
I think I voted Pez dispenser. Yeah.
I think I did too, but it's just barely losing now to the Magic 8 Ball, but we'll see where it gets at the end. Also, I wanted to clarify for the side chat. I said, it's hashtag lemon shirt. I will not be accepting votes for Lemon Party. That is not something I endorse in the side chat. There's not clarification. No, I have not.
No.
Only
hashtag lemon shirt or just hashtag lemon. That would also be sufficient. Or you can save your characters.
Yeah, lemon shirt, but not Lemon Party. There's not. No, that's a no.
Shout out to the Good Mythical Morning fan who knows that it's celibacy week this week. If you make a baby this week, then their birthday is going to be between Christmas and New Year, which is so don't do it. Don't. It's celibacy week. You can't. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to a caller, which will hopefully be a little bit more chill of a conversation. It's a repeat caller. We've got 7, uses she, her pronouns, calling from Oregon, wants to know how to find friends as an atheist and trans individual. Hello, 7, you're live on the line. What's up?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Sorry, I had to take it off speaker. Okay. Hi.
Nice.
I've been waiting a bit. So that last caller actually was a good intro into sort of my concerns and thoughts in here. So I'm an atheist. I'm a trans woman. Those 2 things line up to me. That makes sense to me. But at least this has been my experience living in the South, and I no longer do, by the way. I have relocated. I am in the Pacific Northwest officially.
Hell yeah.
I know, yeah, safety. But in the South, it was very spiritual. Every ounce of trans ideology, I hate even seeing that. The trans community was mostly spiritual in some degree, and even I felt like a minority within my minority group. And I'm now relocated, and I'm hopeful that that's different here. I think it is. I really don't know, but I was hoping there was some advice. Maybe I'm just overthinking this and give people a try. Maybe a different form of spirituality or a different flavor is less hostile than what I'm used to. But I have so much baggage when it comes to this topic that I've almost just instinctually found only people within my own worldviews safe, I guess. And maybe that's a concern I need to, or a baggage I need to shed. I really don't know. I'm just here trying to get some information from you guys.
I think we talked about this, maybe not with you, but I remember talking about this with Josie a few weeks back, that it's hard to make friends with religious people sometimes. And I get it. So I will say, I was just reading an article that in Portland, the fastest growing religious population is the non-religious. So if you're anywhere near Portland, there is actually probably a pretty good chance that there are a lot of atheists around, whether they're necessarily like engaged in an atheist community. Probably not, obviously. But I haven't looked into it in Portland. I know that back in Kansas City, we had Oasis, which was like a Sunday meeting where it's kind of like church, and they do some similar churchy things, like they'll invite musicians and stuff like that. If you're trying to find like atheist specific spaces, I'm sure that that type of thing probably exists. But also, like, I mean, if Christians are the majority of the population, then Christians are necessarily going to be a pretty hefty portion of trans people, and that most likely there's not going to be any way for us to completely avoid that. And I'm not saying that you're wanting to completely avoid religious people. Like, obviously that would not be reasonable, but like in terms of being comfortable that you can fully have your views and everything without, I don't want to like piss off a Christian by just being honest about what I believe about things that they believe. So like if you interact with people in person, you kind of have to not be honest about your atheist beliefs. Like, I've pissed off a trans person by saying that it's not fair that churches are given nonprofit status by default without having to do any of the work that nonprofits have to do to prove. Right. But it was that guy who did the naked protest. It was that trans guy who did the naked protest in New York, Central Park, because people were body shaming Trump. And he was like, I'm fat and I have a tiny penis. This isn't okay. That guy, I got in a huge argument with him about this. So yeah, I mean, to be fair, like to some extent, it is just a matter of trying to find a way to be comfortable around religious people and being like, okay, maybe I have to hold this person at a certain distance from me. We can still work together. We can still, like a lot of homeless services in the Willamette Valley are outsourced to churches. So it's like, if I want to help the homeless population, I'll probably have to volunteer with a church. Maybe you could try to go the Unitarian route and, find a slightly less weird version of it, but it's still going to happen. I don't know. Ben, do you have any advice on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can find some religious people that aren't going to be like impossible to get along with. I do know, of course, there are like the trans community and the atheist communities as a whole have a lot of sketchy people in them. There's obviously, it's not a monolith. There's so many different awful people in both communities. But that being said, like, there are probably some people that are religious that don't make it their whole personality and might not even talk about it around other people. Like, I know there are some trans people within my own circles that are theists, and we just don't bring up that particular issue. It's like it's a non-issue in our conversations because we can just exist as regular people. And, on the flip side too, there are some atheists, of course you can talk shit about religion all you want, like with your atheist buddies, but there are some atheists that are transphobes and homophobes, and they're not going to be around either. So I think like it's admirable to try to find like an atheist LGBTQ community, and I'm sure there's one out where you are now. Like, I'd be very surprised if there wasn't, as especially being in a more progressive area. But even if you can't find like a super good group that encompasses both of those things, I hope that you can at least find one side of that coin that is willing to be, something that you need and not just kind of talk shit about the other side of you.
I also will say
real quick,
that
I have to let the maintenance guy in. So if I have to step away,
go for it. So I was also going to add, I think a lot of people who participate in like the sort of pagan community are not really earnestly invested in that as a belief. And there are a ton of trans queer witches in the Portland area all the way up through Seattle. So like, as far as finding people to be friends with who are likely to share similar beliefs, I honestly think that a lot of people who participate in that kind of stuff are like actually atheists, and they just enjoy the ritual aspect of it and they enjoy the social aspect of it. So it's something that I've considered, like trying to find like a trans pagan group to hang out with. I don't know. that might be it might be unappealing to some people, because I know that if I met a person who was like really deep in their pagan belief and they really were legit about it, I would be very uncomfortable in that situation.
Yeah.
But it's fun for me philosophically and aesthetically, so that is just another option on the table.
Aesthetically agree. That's like something I mean, I've in the South that was very common, but here I just don't know.
Sure.
But no, I'll consider that for sure. I was sort of throwing that off as options, but I'll reconsider that, just for the community, if nothing else. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. That caller mentioned it before, like, what does God have to do with, he said transgenderism, but and you guys mentioned that it's like this idea that you, like, your criteria or requirement for evidence is faltered in that, and I haven't been able to get that out of my head when it comes to any other decision making. How can I trust those individuals? At least from like
I think
more
it's
partner
less
sort of situation, less so for friendship.
Well, yeah, and I think it's less of an issue when, because sure, we can disagree with people about their standard of evidence for God claims, but like my biggest issue with that recent call wasn't the fact that he's religious necessarily, is because he was willing to accept God but not accept evidence for trans people. I think if there's a theist who accepts the evidence for trans people and is charitable to trans people and advocating for trans rights, is progressive, like even is a trans person, I'm less likely to care about their God belief. Like I do disagree with them on that, but the fact that they're not jumping over available evidence to get to a God claim, and like they're still accepting the things like that are tangible on this planet, like I'm a bit more willing to forgive something like that.
So it's more compartmentalized for you there?
Well, it's not. I'm not saying that their God belief is rational, but do you understand where I'm saying there's a difference between, like, if someone accepts that, like, because the evidence for trans people is, you need less extraordinary evidence in order to prove that trans people exist and are valid and deserve a place in society, right? So
Basically,
if
just need a
someone at
picture
least
of one,
can sequentially stratify the amount of evidence needed, and like if somebody says, okay, yeah, my threshold for belief in God has been met, like I would say, okay, yeah, that's it, I would need more extraordinary evidence to have that met for me. But at least on the lower tiers of things that require evidence, those things at least have been met for their perspective too.
I guess.
They just accept one additional claim than what I did, but at least we agree on things up to that point. Where the caller was concerning was that he said there's not enough evidence to support trans people, but there is enough evidence to support God. That's where there's a disconnect for me, and that's a more concerning disconnect than someone who accepts trans people and also accepts God.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's really all I had. I wanted to give you guys an update. I mean, you both were very helpful in getting me out. So I just want to let you know that I'm safe. And now exploring and trying to figure out how to grow roots. At least you can here. It's not a swamp.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you made it.
I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah, it's awesome up here. We just had like that crazy storm yesterday, like almost had the tornado. I'm sorry I brought the Kansas weather with me up here. But I always recommend just getting into your own hobbies, like I'm going to get a membership at a gun range, and I'm going to meet people there who might agree with me about some things and might disagree with me about some things, and like maybe I'm not going to be close friends, but at least like I'm branching out socially, right? So wherever you're doing that, I have made actually one friend since I moved up here, and it's because I got into the community garden, and there was just someone there who happened to have a lot of the same kind of beliefs as me. And now that's like the only person I know in this area that I regularly text. So you just got to do the things that you already love to do, and you'll attract the people who are going to work with you as friends,
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Good luck. You can do it. I believe in you.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
All right. We'll talk to you later,
thanks for
Seven.
calling.
Bye-bye.
So I
All
do want to
right.
give a little bit of an apology because that was not the maintenance guy. So I will at some point need to go let the maintenance guy in, and it's one of those things they give you a window, and so I'm like, sorry if I have to get up a bunch, but
Just
that's just a
anytime
heads
within
up
this
for real.
5-hour period, someone's going to show up to your
Yeah.
house, and then they don't even show up that day.
Yeah, it's like, well, they're gonna call me when they're here, and so I just have to let them in. But so just a heads up, if I get up, that's why.
No worries. We currently only have one caller remaining, so don't forget as we get close to the end of the show to hit the like button. It's still useful even this late in the show. Got about like 450 viewers right now. Let's make sure that that like number is at least on par with that number of viewers. Okay, appreciate you guys. We love you. And don't forget your super chats, $5 or more. You get to vote. And with all that said, I guess we're ready to take our last caller. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right. So this is Ewan from Scotland, uses he, him pronouns, wants to talk about disability discrimination being used to dismiss trans people. Ewan, did I say your name right? You're live on the line. What's up?
You got it absolutely right. Thank you very much. No, that's perfect.
Hey.
And there's a lot of people even in the UK that get it wrong, so don't worry about it. I guarantee I'll have been called something more offensive at some point, so don't worry. I hope both of you.
Well, you dropped off a little bit there, Ewan. Oh no!
No.
Did the call drop? No!
No. We'll wait.
Oh,
we'll
that
let you get back
sucks.
in.
They fully dropped? Oh, man.
Oh, that sucks.
I know they had some issues when they were calling in. I can open one line and give it like 2 minutes. Or I'll open 2 lines to come in. This is for Ewan only. If you are anyone else, I will drop you. Every time I do this, the lines flood with people who are not the... Okay, Ewan called right back. I'll bring them right on.
I'm really sorry about that. That was entirely my fault.
No, it's okay.
We got you back.
Yeah, sorry. I just the reason I was wanting to raise it is that it's something I've noticed an increasing trend in lots of discussion spaces where you've got the kind of your typical transphobic element, where there seems to be this consistent attack on well, obviously on the idea of people being able to express the gender that they identify with, but using a lot of language relating to particularly people with learning impairments or neurodivergence diagnoses as if they're unable to make decisions for themselves. And I suppose I don't really know 100% what my question is as such, other than really have you interacted much with those people, you know, like in terms of like, because as I see it, you know, like the trans community and the disabled community, we've got a huge amount in common in terms of our oppression coming from the same place, you know. Yeah, that's all I kind of really wanted to raise.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, if we really crack down on what all forms of oppression have in common, like, I honestly kind of think that ableism is at the bottom of all of it. Like, there's like the belief that, like, you know, the benevolent stereotype of Asian people being extra smart, or like the racist stereotype that Black people are, they're good athletes, but they're not so good in the academics, right? Like, there's all these things, and like women are not as strong and they're not as smart. Like, trans people have a mental illness and therefore blah, blah, blah. Like, honestly, I think if we really examine this, that ableism is kind of underlying all of these ideologies, or at least that an ableist narrative is part of every single one of them, if you really dig into it. Yeah, and mostly when I see the infantilization of trans people, I see it within this context of like, oh God, no, the ADHD, it strikes me down again. Oh man, I lost my thought. Okay, never mind.
I totally appreciate that in terms of I get that kind of you get this brain fog immediately and everything goes out of the head.
It's like an Etch-a-Sketch,
but
like, and then it's just gone.
Such a good analogy for it. But yeah, actually, I really appreciate that perspective in terms of this idea, and I suppose like I'm coming from a kind of anti-capitalist perspective in that everyone's value seems to be based on what they can earn for someone else. Do you know, like, but the idea that ableism or those narratives is underpinning everything's a really interesting thing that I'm going to need to dig more into. Do you know, because I was reading that I think it's well over a third of those with neurodivergent diagnoses have their gender identity repeatedly questioned, and it would appear significantly more than kind of neurotypical counterparts because of their neurodivergence. You know, as if people with any form of additional support needs can't also not identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. You know, and
yeah,
I
that
think
is actually what I was going to say.
Really
was the autism thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, like at the moment, I am well aware that American politics is probably taking precedent in your minds at the moment for lots of reasons. But there's been some pretty major attacks on disabled people's rights in Britain over the last kind of week and a half, really. So there's a lot of disabled people kind of getting organised around demonstrations, but also online activity and getting in touch with local members of parliament, all the stuff that you do when things are happening. And actually, one of the most radical elements at the moment within the disabled people's movement is the kind of queer group within it. You know, I'm not trans, but I'm queer. You know, and I don't know if it's because and I don't think that there's any automatic solidarity between different oppressed groups. You know, you do get homophobic ethnic minorities, you get racist queer groups, people. You know, like but I think sometimes when you're under attack, it teases these ideas out that we're all getting shat on really by the same people.
Yeah, I could totally agree with that. Yeah. You want to get in, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, there's been attacks on like neurodivergent people and generally like disabled people here too, with the whole RFK situation and like just deciding that like people with autism, especially those that need like more social support, suddenly they don't matter anymore. Like the intersectionality of it all definitely does play in here as well. And yeah, the infantilization of disabled people and of trans people, and like the infantilization of anybody that is not a cishet white man. It's like there's every other group of people, there's some reason why they're just too incapable of whatever is happening. Yeah, no, I definitely agree that there's ableist underpinnings to like all of these issues.
That's really interesting. And I suppose like with characters like RFK, like I mean, it's one of the things. My impairment is kind of purely physical, although obviously with most physical impairments, you've kind of got associated mental health issues that go along with it. Whereas my younger brother, he has an autism diagnosis, and I'm one of his carers, and he was diagnosed in the late 90s, and obviously the Andrew Wakefield MMR causes autism stuff was rife at the time, you know, and like one of the things that I've always tried to argue with people is that even if vaccines caused autism, which they absolutely don't, but even if they did, surely it would be better to have an autistic child than a child that died of a preventable disease or was left with an acquired brain injury from a preventable disease. And I think it typifies the way that disabled people are viewed in society, that you'd rather your child died than was neurodivergent, you know, and like my brother's autism was not caused by fucking vaccines, so I want to make that explicitly clear.
Yeah, but it all comes back to the same thing, is like undesirable groups of people. And like obviously disabled people have been under attack for, you know, longer than just the past week. Like everything that both of our governments have done to reduce tracking and prevention of the spread of COVID have been like explicitly couched in the language of like, well, this will only hurt the undesirables, so it's fine. Like it's fine for us to go to brunch. It doesn't matter because you know, only disabled people are going to be impacted. And like, what do you need to go anywhere for anyway? Why don't you just stay home? Like, why should I have to do anything different? Like, it's all part of the same kind of thing going on, which is why you end up with like the vocabulary of like kyriarchy, spelled KY, kyriarchy is like the combination of patriarchy and white supremacy and all of these things. Like, yeah, they're ultimately, we're going through a very interesting period of time where like it's like a commonly accepted in a way that I do not know if it was during like the lead up into World War II and everything. Like there seems to be a much more explicit acceptance of the underlying eugenics involved in all of these conversations, whether it's trans people or disabled people or whoever, which I find troubling, obviously. And I don't know how to address it really, because people seem to be okay with anything happening to someone who's not them. And it's hard to convince people that they are also going to be affected. It's like the more we cut Social Security or the more we cut disability benefits, the more we allow a disabling and deadly illness to spread unchecked in our communities. Like it's going to get you at some point. You might have 10 infections that don't leave you with a permanent injury, but that 11th one most likely will, because the damage is cumulative and everything. So yeah, it's perplexing to me, the idea that I just don't care about this because it's not personally affecting me, or like I want to delude myself into believing that this will not personally affect me. And then suddenly they're coming after like white immigrants and also brown immigrants. And now it's a problem because they're coming after the German immigrants. People don't get afraid until they think that they could be affected.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with society is just the lack of willingness to fight for something that doesn't immediately affect you.
Yeah, no, I completely. Sorry, I was just unlocking my phone. I completely agree with that. While I don't think the only reason that you should fight is because it directly impacts you, like I have had to remind people that, like, if they're lucky enough to live long enough, everyone will become disabled at some point. So it does directly affect you. Like, it's unusual compared to some other forms of oppression or the way that people are oppressed, in that, like, that it will come for anyone that lives long enough, or it will come because of a workplace injury, because your boss doesn't care about health and safety, or I mean, anyone can be hit by a bus and all of a sudden become a disabled person. Do you know, like, I was thinking on that actually as you were talking to Brad, and that sort of like, do you know, is that these things just happen. I wasn't born as a disabled person. I became a disabled person in my mid-20s. Ironically, after years of working with disabled people, do you know, and like and obviously growing up with my younger brother, so I was lucky in that I was somewhat rooted in disability politics, but I still had all the stuff that goes along with becoming disabled in terms of mental health crises and yada yada yada, you know. And it was, I thought it was a really interesting poll that you put up tonight, because it answered it. Not that I necessarily come down hard on it, and actually I thought, Ben, you explained this stuff really well in terms of like the reason I'd said that it could be indicative of ongoing risks to mental health is because we live in a society that traumatizes people, you know. And I can offer solidarity. I've not experienced it, but I can only imagine that being trans in this shit world can be incredibly traumatizing, which we know has lasting mental health impacts on people, you know. It's not to say that being trans is in of itself a mental illness, because I don't believe that that's true, and I don't believe that the data would back that. But in an oppressed minority is hugely traumatizing, for all the reasons that you've discussed tonight. Yeah, sometimes I just need to talk to folks that I know are going to be sound about talking about this stuff.
Yeah. And I think that another shared quality, like I'm trans and disabled, and most people don't know that looking at me. Like I have a physical disability, but it's an invisible disability. But they both involve, unless you are born with your disability and you grew up dealing with it in childhood, or you realized you were trans when you were 3 and your parents supported you in your transition. I think every person who becomes disabled later in life, or most people who realize that they're trans, because that tends to happen later in life, it is a huge mental shift into like how you conceive of yourself. And that's why, with trans people, it tends to be like an ongoing process for a period of years, even for some people. Disability, you don't really get the same. I mean, I guess mine it was like a gradual, like, oh, I have to really start accepting these limitations. And I kept trying to push past them in a way that was obviously, destructive in the way that tends to be. But yeah, it's like something you cannot control. It involves a huge update to your sense of self. And then suddenly the world is much harder to deal with for some reason that has nothing to do with you, like nothing to do with what you've done. It's just like now you have to start existing as a marginalized person. And I think that is obviously traumatic. Going through huge shifts of self, regardless of the situation, is traumatic. When your parents get divorced, that's traumatic if you're young enough, But yeah, it is really interesting to think about those kind of overlaps of experience and to wonder why it is that we don't view those commonalities as much as we get caught up on our differences.
Yeah, no, I really identify with what you're saying. It's really valuable to kind of hear, particularly as you're saying. I was spending a lot of time yesterday talking to some trans disabled people that were obviously terrified at cuts to services and things, particularly because, like, already trans people find it harder to access disability healthcare, and disabled people find it harder to access gender affirming care for the nuances of being from multiple marginalised groups. But talking to them about this increased attack, and but also hearing the way that they've often found commonalities between those two experiences has been really interesting in terms of just trying to understand my fellow human better, and also how we fight for a better world. Like I come from a kind of what would be called the social model tradition of disability, in that people can have an impairment, but it's living in an inaccessible world that makes you a disabled person. And like I would love to think that we could live in a world where someone's gender expression doesn't have to be made by the world that they live in so traumatizing to go through, and that the world would just go, all right, cool, we'll accommodate, we'll change our language, we'll change the way that we're doing things because we value you, not for any reason other than you're a person, and I do think that as working across these groups and working together on these issues will help resolve some of that, but it's getting those with power to engage, and I may be wrong on this, but I've kind of come to the position of they only do things when we make them. So how do we make them?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. They don't want to give you anything. Yeah. You got to take things. Yeah, that's pretty much the position that I've landed in.
Yeah. So sorry that there wasn't much of a question couched in this. I suppose I just kind of wanted to talk to people with a lot more experience than I do, not only in terms of trans rights and trans liberation, but also like engaging with people from a multitude of different backgrounds. And like I must say, like all I wanted to comment during Brad's call was that if there are people more knowledgeable than you, then why are they not the ones fucking phoning in? Why is it you? Do you know, like, and it's where I'm trying to come from, in that, like, I've always got more to learn. Do you know, like, I know next to nothing. Even in terms of my own impairment, I'm pretty useless. Do you know, as you were saying, and that kind of, you make decisions that aren't necessarily the healthiest. I need to rely on other people to be in the world, do you know? So why would I think I know everything on anything?
Yeah, I love knowing that I don't know everything. I love experiencing that gap. We're getting kind of toward the end of the show, but like, last comment from me. I really love when I have that moment of like, I can sense that there's a giant well of knowledge that I don't have. Like, did you know that there's a bunch of different kinds of paper? And that it matters what paper you use when you're doing watercolor paintings. Like, just I'm trying to do something for fun, and now I'm like, oh, now there's like, I just realized that there's a whole knowledge base that I haven't even tapped into. But no, I appreciate the call. I like talking about commonalities of experience. I think it's worthy to push more awareness of disability, because that is like one of the groups that is still acceptable to be shitty toward. Disability advocacy, I feel, lags behind so many other forms of advocacy. And when disabled people make demands, like, we are mistreated in ways that I think it's broadly considered unacceptable to treat other marginalized groups that way when they're making demands about being heard or being at the table. So I do appreciate the opportunity to, bring more awareness to that, even though that is not the central focus of this show. Trans people can also be disabled and can also be all these other things. So it's important to at least touch on those every once in a while. So I appreciate it, Ewan. Do you want to get any last comments in before we go ahead and switch over to super chats for the day?
Just wanted to thank you. Thanks very much. I've really enjoyed the show, and look after yourselves. I've got lots to listen back to and read up on now. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for calling.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
And we'll chat again in the future. Bye.
Cheers, folks.
Okay. That is the end of the calls for today. Woo! That was a fun show. I feel like I became a tomato on multiple occasions today. I was like, I'm trying to match my tank top right now.
Yes.
It happens. Yep. So super chats time. $5 or more. We'll get your super chats in. Yeah, we read them and you can vote. Hashtag Team Lemon or hashtag Team Skull, because lemons are Ben's thing and skulls are my thing, apparently. Yeah, that was a great way to end the show. Love that. Do you want to start us off on super chats?
Sure. $5 from Jason Jones. Pauls Valley, Oklahoma is having our first Pride event on June 1st, and I got 2 new goslings. More geese. Hashtag team Hoovel Snoots. Is that you? Is that for you?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Shuvel Snoots?
It might be referencing hognose snakes, which have like a shovel nose.
Oh, so it's an Arden vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We should include the producer on the votes. That'd be funny.
It would be funny. Yeah, just like force them to come on right at the end. That would be funny.
Yeah.
1000 RSD from Helios says, just wanted to apologize for not using Luxander's preferred pronoun set last time. That is okay. I appreciate your contribution and your apology. I am not mad. Everything's fine. I'm going to get a refill of my water, so you can take this one and I'll be right back.
All right. $5 from Cutthroat Juggalo. What a name. Hey, if you're reading this, then know that you're loved and I'm glad you're alive. Thank you. Thank you so much. Your picture and your name are a trip. That's great. I can keep reading them while Lex is away.
Okay.
£5 from Sean Isherwood. There are gaps in the surreal numbers. One of them is that little degree symbol. In fact, there are more gaps than surreal numbers. There is a game for each gap. Good to know. Thank you, Sean. $10 from John Urich.
Sorry, everybody. I'm so thirsty.
You're good. I just kept reading without you. There weren't any votes.
All good.
$10 from John Urich. Oh, of course. I've had hashtag Team Lux. And Team Lux is the
Yeah.
first on the board, living rent free in my head. For it's encouraging me to come out a few weeks ago. I'm not ready, but I'm close.
Yes.
Well, it looks like you did
So
it
proud of
good
you.
for the community.
Yes. I don't even know. I have genuinely lost count at this point of how many people attribute their coming out to me, which I'm like, yes, that's success for me. 5 Canadian from Veeks, thank you. Says, so glad hashtag Team Ben is back in the last few weeks. We missed your expertise. Agreed. It's lovely to have Ben around.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have that vote as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is
this one yours? Did I just read one? Have I lost my mind?
Oh, yeah, you did. $10 from Inquisitive Leftist. Howdy, this was Cursed Chaos. I took the RADS aura test and the score was 188. So I'm not learning anything new though. Hashtag Team Anarchy Lux. Hashtag Texas was a mistake.
True.
Texas is a mistake.
Why are you people even there? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Right?
$5 from Paige McLaughlin says, I think we should have over-the-counter HRT. High five. Agreed. I feel like, yeah, you should be able to just schedule your blood work with Quest Diagnostics every 3 months and just go pick it up at the pharmacy. Like, I don't, same with birth control. Like, why is this being regulated in this way?
Yeah,
I
think injectables could still be prescription, but like the patches and the oral could be over the counter. Or like an androgel could be over the counter.
Mm-hmm. It's like, as long as you can read the label and understand that, you're entering a legal contract of risk there.
As long as you understand the risk, then that'd be fine. 5 Canadian from David Haxor, hashtag Team Lux.
Thank you. Namaste.
And then another one.
Oh no. 5 Canadian from David Haxor, hashtag Team Ben. No! Betrayal.
Betrayal. $10 from Sentient Tree. If you could be resurrected into any fictional universe, which would you choose and why? Question for both hosts. Hashtag Team Ben. Us men are just so persecuted these days. We have to stick together. Yeah. Yeah. The patriarchy. Support the patriarchy. Any fictional universe.
I mean, I guess my easy answer is the inheritance cycle, because they have a magic system that would allow me to physically change my body in interesting ways. So I'll go with that one.
I have a few options, and I can't decide if I want to go the more silly route or the more serious route. So, I'm going to go the more silly route. I'm going to say SpongeBob because I want a Krabby Patty. I want to go
Delicious.
it's just so absurd. Like the talking fish, like being able to live under a rock, like in the sand and have sand furniture and like have a pet snail. I'm going to say SpongeBob. Why not?
Hell yeah. $5 from Stina. Thank you. Says, my VA hospital has officially ripped down all the LGBT plus posters and I'm afraid to fight back or quit. This is a literal nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary right now.
Yeah. All the government
VA
stuff
is they're not doing this care anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously bad stuff. Whoa.
Yeah, it sucks. $20 from Ash Glitch. Ashley here. Thanks for taking my call and answering my questions. Oh yeah, thank you for the call. Thanks for coincidentally having a call that worked with the poll for the week.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That worked out nicely. 5 Canadian from Fragged Locust said, had a nice fresh cup of tears this morning. Very refreshing. Hashtag Team Lux. Nice.
Oh, no.
I did on request from a chatter put a mug in my personal store that says Elon's tears. It's only going to be in there for like 1 week. I was like, what happens if you do a FOMO release for 1 week? We'll find out. So delicious. Yummy.
$5 from Maud. Tuesday was my second HRT-versary, and I wore a dress to work for the first time. It felt so right. I still don't know what transgender ideology is. Well, congrats on your HRT-versary and your progress in wearing a dress to work. And yeah, I don't know what trans ideology is. No idea.
Trans people exist seems to kind of be what it comes down to consistently.
Yeah, it's like... Yeah.
Trans people exist and that's okay. is
Yeah.
like the whole totality of the ideology. £5 from Mystic Minds Analysis Tavern says, why does a person's body require dictating a social role? As I always say, we are just brains in a mech suit of flesh and bone. Hashtag Team Ben. Yes, I am a robot. A flesh robot.
Why do we care what is in someone else's pants? I don't understand why that needs to be anyone's business. Wild.
Crazy.
$5 from Monkey a Typewriter. Ben living that speak softly and carry a big penis life. Love it. And since I said something nice about Ben, hashtag Team Lux, hashtag never give up the bit. There we go. I love that you're committing to it, even when it's about somebody else and not about me, but it's fine.
And it happened more than once too. I just was like, saw them as they were coming in. I'm like, why I don't understand. Whatever. It doesn't matter. 5 Canadian from David Haxor, hashtag Team Arden Heart. There we go.
There you go.
We're gonna have
Arden's
to
got
make
2 votes
Arden
now.
rework the graphics so that then there's also just like a counter for her on the side. We're fully covering up the name at the bottom. Like that's what's gonna happen.
What happens if we both lose to Arden? I feel like there needs to be an extra punishment for if we lose to the producer.
That would be fun. Yeah, we have to like tag
maybe
team
we
the
both
argument
have to give
or
the
something.
argument. Yeah, if we both have to give the argument, if the producer wins,
that would be fun.
We're just gonna lose every single time. Then the producer's just gonna win every single time.
I know, awful.
But
$10 from Stephen G. Clinard. Thank you. Says trans folks are awesome, and I want them to be happy and healthy. That's my gender ideology. So scary. Ooh, scary. I know.
Crazy.
Thank you for your support. David Haxor is still doing it. I just looked over in the chat, and there he is again.
Yeah. 5 Canadian from David Haxor, hashtag Team Ben, hashtag Team Lux, and the fence sitter. Yeah, David Haxor is just chaotic. Like your alignment is just chaotic.
Yep. Got the chaotic neutral energy.
Yeah.
$5 from Alyashana Silverboat says, the first rule of Dunning-Kruger Club, you don't know you are in Dunning-Kruger Club. Hashtag Team Dr. Lemons. Lux removed its skull shirt, so no Team Skull. I got the skull. That's a good one though. The Dunning-Kruger Club, you don't know that you're in the...
That needs to be my mug for next year.
Yeah. We need that on a t-shirt.
Yes, that should be, if we make TACIS merch, because we still need TACIS merch, that should be.
We do.
That would
be solid. Take note.
Love it. Oh, you got that
team started. True.
Infinity negative 956.
I love that the Josie versus Arden competition has made its way into a show where neither of them are like hosting it.
Yes.
Love that. Good stuff.
Start voting. And people are going to start voting for the absent hosts.
Yeah.
$10 from Stephen G. Clinard. Lux is awesome. Hashtag Team Ben. See, I love that. I love that the celebration and opposite voting is going both ways now.
Yeah. It balances out, $10 from Stephen G. Clinard says, Ben is awesome. Hashtag Team Lux. There we go. Got to keep it moving. I'm going to get the cat. I
don't think I got the vote from the last one. There we go. No, it's okay. You got it.
But did I not do Lux's for this one? So confused.
No, Lux should have one more than me, I think.
Okay. Oh, one more. Okay.
I think, yeah.
I see there's like 10 super chats coming in, all very rapid fire. So I'm like, oh God, oh boy. Buckle up.
Yeah.
At least they're pretty short.
$5 from Monkey Typewriter. Brad isn't using straw man arguments. Brad is the straw man. Now all we need is a caller with no heart and one with no courage. Hashtag Team liking me some Lux.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
It's punny. It's punny.
I just like woke up my cat. He's just like, okay, when are you gonna put me down now? $5 from DaCosta says, I have to sit through a 2-hour OPSEC refresher when my coworker charges their phone through the work-issued laptop. But these people...
Right? Yeah, it's like, funny. I've done all of my OPSEC training for the year, and yet somehow I'm still the problem with the military.
Yeah. This week has just been a cluster. And like the fact that there's not going to be an investigation is... it's just crazy. Not a good thing. 5 Canadian from David Hacksaur says, happy birthday, Lux. Hashtag Team Ben. Thank you.
Evening up the score
It's
a
like,
little
I still
bit.
get a cut anyway. Whoever you vote for, I still get my
It's gonna be
birthday
a nail
cut.
biter. 499 from Sarah Wilson. Lux and Dr. Ben's team mascot should be a skeleton drinking a glass of lemonade. Hashtag lemon sushi.
That would be
I voted
interesting.
for yeah, I don't. Lemon is good on some sushi, but I'm not going to put lemon on my cat. I don't think she'd like it very much. She'd probably hate me.
She'd go to bathe herself later and be like,
oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
$10 from Wade Hathaway Music says, happy birthday, Lux. Hashtag Team Ben. This is going to be how it goes down. This is how I go down.
This is what they do. This is what they've done to me for a while. So it's $20 from Mr. Boricua 10. Oh, it's another British one. British. Wait, Brad, was my wifey inability to learn and accept the mountain of evidence, bruv? Are you too proud to listen to it? Dr. Ben, give it a right blocking for you and antiquated ideas. Antiquated ideas. It's
yeah.
It's like this text is hard to read. Absolutely disgraceful. Be better, mate. This is where I wish we had Katie around.
I know. Just make her read all those ones. That's racist.
Do it. Yeah. Yeah, racist against British people.
Yeah. Thank you for the $10 from Bree Dunham, who says, I'm closeted and dealing with chronic illness. I have to move to legit the middle of nowhere with my vocally transphobic fam. Thoughts on staying sane while there? Appreciate y'all so much. Hashtag Team Lux. I mean, keep your opinions to yourself is kind of my advice. If you're going to be in a position where you're like ill and you have to rely on these people to take care of you, the last thing you want to do is piss those people off.
Yeah. Stay close with your online community and hopefully they won't give you too much crap. $5 from Catherine Sleep 79. Thank you all. Also, thank you, Lux, for reminding me about community gardens.
I'm doing my part.
Community gardens.
It was like only $25 for me to rent like an enormous plot for this entire season. So I'm excited once it gets warmer to plant some stuff. $5 from Melatonin Ale says, hashtag team happy birthday, Lux. I am ADHD and my thoughts always leave me mid-sentence too. I have to write myself a script for one-on-one meetings with my boss. Oh yeah, it's such a struggle. I haven't really been taking my ADHD meds since I moved either. We're just kind of raw dogging life and see how it goes. And what happens is sometimes in a 4-hour show, like a 3-hour show, I sometimes forget what I'm saying in the middle of what I'm saying. One time in a 3-hour show is not that bad.
It's okay. I didn't take my meds today, and also I do that with my meds, so we all know how it goes.
People are always like, "Oh, you're drug seeking," and I'm like, I literally fucking forget to take my pills. It's fine. Yeah. Don't worry about it.
And they're literally sitting right here on the desk, and I still forget to take them.
I have mine on my bedside table because for a while I would take it when my first alarm went off, so that by the time my second alarm went off, it had started to work, and then I could wake up and have a morning routine. It was my therapist recommended it. Great idea. I don't do it ever anymore. It's just there on my nightstand every day.
$5 from Inquisitive Leftist. I think that MAGA are kleptocratic, kakistocratic kooks. Hashtag Team Mitternacht. There you go.
$5 from Zurith Moonpaw says, you brought this on yourself, honestly. Hashtag Dr. Ben. Hashtag Lemon Party shirt.
It was because somebody in the side chat, it might have been Zurith even, that said Lemon Party. Like somebody in chat brought it up, and I just had to clarify that it was not what I was asking for. And that people should not go search it. Like, just don't.
Don't Google that, by the way. We didn't say that at the time. Don't Google Lemon Party, especially if you're at work. $10 from YouTuber Grudge says, got a rep for hashtag Team Ben, hashtag trans mask. It's like, it's so funny because like by definition of transition, I am trans mask, but I am not masculine in presentation. So it's just kind of funny how that works out.
Yeah.
I'm not bothered though.
£5 from Sean Isherwood. That should have been the lazy 8 infinity symbol, not the degree symbol. Oh, well, I'm glad of the excuse to give more money. Hey, You don't have to give an excuse to give more money. Like, we appreciate your donation, Sean. We appreciate your math jokes. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I like being made to cast spells that I don't understand. That's kind of how I feel every time we get one of those math ones. I'm like, that could have been an incantation to bring back fucking the mummy, and I wouldn't know. 5 Canadian from David Haxor, hashtag Team Ben. Thank you. You're breaking the tie. Doing God's work.
I know, this is a nail biter of a competition today.
It is.
Here you go. 5 Canadian from David Haxor, hashtag Team Ben 2. This is the chaotic neutral energy. Oh my god.
5 Canadian, David Haxor, hashtag Team Ben 3. Chaos. Smiley face. Indeed. It's true.
Good thing it likes doing the little speech at the end, because otherwise this might be more.
I know, it would be so sad. It's almost a prize. It's like a consolation for losing when you get to do the thing at the end.
Yeah, right. You get more screen time? What is this? $5.
I know, crazy.
Haley Geringer, hashtag Team Lux. There we go. Next thing you know, Haley's going to be in the side chat giving Lux. Oh, here we do. We have Haley with Team Lux too. I love this.
Thank you, Haley.
Counteracting all of David Haxor's stuff. I guess 5 Canadian from David Haxor. Love you, Lux, but want to see you argue a silly point. Hashtag Team Ben. Especially with those.
What even is it? Which one won today? I can't see the poll anymore.
It's the pest
I don't know which one won.
It's so weird.
Okay. Pest dispensers.
Oh, yeah. Weird. On my end, it looks like the 8 ball is winning. But also, even though I unpinned the lines are open chat over on my side window, I run 2 PCs often when I'm doing production. The pinned message is still up there, and I've refreshed like 10 times and it won't go away. So I don't know. Chat is like broken. I'll hit end poll and we'll get a real result. So
yeah, chat.
I guess it'll be a mystery until we're over.
Yeah.
$5 from Haley says hashtag Team Lux 3. Yes. Thank you. Appreciate that.
This chat is nonsense. I love it.
Yeah, it's great. Perfect.
Oh my god. Nice. 5 Canadian for David Haxor. Hashtag Team Ben 5.
Are you working your way up to Ben 10, David?
Maybe.
Like that's
Maybe.
the culmination of the joke is Ben 10. Thank you for the $10 from Catherine Sleep 79, who says, for the cat, indeed. Cat is God.
All the cat.
We worship.
We worship our cats. My cat owns me.
$5.
I
picked him up and bothered him and then put him down, and he just laid back down. He was like, okay, whatever.
Hashtag Team Birthday NB. There you go.
Thank you very much. I'm turning 31. Crazy.
Old.
$5 from Sentient Tree. Yeah, I know. Pulling out the cat might be cheating, but hashtag Team Soft Black Void. You're only a year younger. Okay, nice.
I'm not even a year younger. No, because like I'm a July birthday, so I'm only a few months.
You're turning 31 later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
nice. Hell yeah. But anyway, that was hashtag Team Lux. You're right. It's a nail biter. The tension is rising.
5 Canadian from Ponderous Nerve. Some treat money for the feline overlord. Hashtag Team Cat. Hashtag Team Lux. You know, you might be.
He appreciates it.
Might be pulling through here.
$5 from Zereth Moonpaw. Hashtag Team Lux. Happy birthday. I turned 34 on Saturday. Hashtag Ty. Happy birthday to you, Zereth. I hope you have a good birthday this weekend. I got Lego. That's one of the birthdays that I got.
5 Canadian from David Haxor. Hashtag Team Ben 6.
Hell yeah. Still going.
This is great.
$6.66 from Jupiter Quake. Thank you. It says, defend far and wide. Our transgender brothers and sisters never stop reaching for the furthest star. Trans flag, trans flag, trans flag, trans flag. Saturn, hearts. Good.
Yay.
Sometimes I just like saying all the emojis. I don't know. Just a little bit weird.
5 Canadian from David Haxor. Hashtag Team Ben 7. You know, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at this.
5 Canadian again from David Haxor. Hashtag Team Ben 8.
I think he is trying to get to 10.
That would make sense.
Somebody
to me.
jumped the gun here.
I know.
Yeah, it's true.
$5 from Mira G. Thanks for the suggestion, Lux. Love ya. Hashtag Team Ben 10. Jumping the gun for David Haxtor.
I like how this
Missed 9.
completely undermines the suspense David's been building up over the course of the entire super chat portion.
Oh no, that is really funny.
Oh, back to the countdown.
From David Haxtor. Hashtag Team Ben 9.
Chaos.
Nice. I like how this one person has voted for you like 10 times, but we're still very close to being tied. Like one person is just carrying you today, Ben.
I put this one up, but this one's only $2, so that actually doesn't count as a vote. However,
oh no,
doesn't count as a vote. Nope.
David came through, so
David gave 11.
he didn't even do the 10. He just skipped it entirely.
It's like we're just gonna keep counting anyway.
We already did that
David,
one.
I'm very happy that you know how to count.
Okay, the voting
Nice. Thank you.
is through. I think Ben has won. Lux has lost,
Sorry,
and let's wrap up this poll and see what real results we get. Come on, chat. YouTube chat has been so busted. The last year, I've had more and more bugs. I don't know what is going on.
Why are you
These are great
broken?
questions.
Oh, it's doing the thing where it's saying that I need to log in again because
what?
For some reason it loves to. That. I'm like in the middle of a stream. Why would you log me out? It doesn't make any sense.
Obnoxious. It does that to me too all the time, though.
There we go. Okay, Ben was right. I think Pez Dispensers is the winner. Okay.
Yep, looks like it.
So I will get your stadium ready to be set up.
Yeah. This is gonna be easy. This one's like it doesn't even. It's just like barely even silly. It is only just barely a silly proposition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Take off. I guess I'll leave. Nah. Well, I'm not trying to manipulate anybody into voting for me anymore. So I'll take off the glasses.
Are we ready? All right.
Yes.
Charging up the clock. And 3, 2, 1, go.
Everybody's always like, let's talk about the biological aspect of being trans. Let's medicalize this. Let's make sure we get diagnosed and everything. And I'm out here like, not only should you be able to go to the pharmacy and just say, hello, I would like some titty Skittles, please. Take that to its logical conclusion. Just have it on the candy shelf. Nothing could possibly go wrong, first of all. And second of all, that's exactly where it should be because it is easily dispensed and has a sugar flavor. I don't actually think that any pills have a sugar flavor, but wouldn't that be an improvement if our HRT, like, oh, you're doing the sublingual, you got to stick it under your tongue, make it grape flavor and get it, and you get like a little toy at the top of it too. I mean, you get like, let's try to innovate the technology for trans men so that we can have a werewolf topper for the trans boys. Because right now you can't really take pills for testosterone. And then for the girlies, you can have all kinds of different things. I mean, the trans girls, honestly, like you get a little cow at the top of it. You get a little bunny at the top of it. You get a little cat, a little dog. You're representing the entire full spectrum of trans femme gender expression, which often comes in the form of also, the deer. Don't forget deer girls, okay? We can't forget deer girls. So when you go to the candy aisle, you'll see all these very welcoming, child-friendly Pez dispensers full of pills that will radically change your sexual organs. And that's perfect. I don't know what could possibly go wrong. I will not entertain any counter arguments that maybe this is not a good idea. And I will stand by it until the day that I die. I'll take it to my grave. And I'm running out of words to say. But I'm standing my ground. Change my mind? You can't.
Love it.
Thanks, everybody. That's a fun show. We had a good time. We got to cut loose a little bit today. Got to get some of our frustration out of our systems, and also had some nice conversations with good people who just needed a little clarification on stuff. So I feel like it's a quite balanced show for today. Yeah, so look forward to next week when 2 transgender hosts will certainly be here. I could not possibly tell you which ones, but same bat time, same bat channel. We'll see you next week. Don't forget that you can join the Patreon, which you should do because you can get on the list of the credits. Like, it's on this side of the screen. Yeah, it's on that side. Go over there, go to the Patreon, get all the secret stuff, get access to the Discord. Don't forget to check your YouTube notifications. You get the notification for next week because, like, every show on here is super cool. Everybody's having fun, and you're required to attend. That's the new executive order.
You're required.
Bye.